Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. I have chat system and become Batman's teacher at start. Chapter 1. In Gotham City, on a not bright but still warm morning, Schiller put down the coffee cup in his hand and heard the sound of his colleague Anna's high heels. After a while, a blonde American sweetheart came in with a dark face and said, "The freshmen, the slackers at the reporting office have taken a day off, you can take the day off." Schiller said, "Come on here, please get this cup of coffee." "You'll never try to get me," Anna roared, and Schiller happily took the coffee and walked out of the cafe. He glanced at the never-sunny days in Gotham City, and began his 5th day here. Schiller was a psychologist in his last life. After the plane crash, he was thrown into this simple city with folk customs. Fortunately, he is neither a hero nor a villain, but a leisurely and stable university teacher, professor. Schiller was happy to be able to touch fish for another day. The system in his mind, ding-dong, and displayed, "Peter Parker has sent a chat request." As Schiller walked towards the report, he replied in his mind, "What's the matter?" "Peter. Hey, I'm going for an internship at Osborn tomorrow. You don't know how rare this opportunity is for me. And Gwen, I mean, she's going too, we're together, it's awesome. We can be together talking about genome helices, those awesome big machines." Schiller said silently in his heart, "No girl would want to discuss this with you, little spider, stay awake." Since he came here, Schiller has obtained a Mime chat system. The first person he unlocked was Peter Parker, the little spider, who has been talking to him about how he likes Gwen for 4.5 days. The mental journey of a teenager who wants to pursue her, but dare not. While encouraging Peter, Schiller walked to the reporting office. He sat down and sorted out the form, waiting for the New Year's freshman to report. However, it is strange to say that Schiller has been here for so many days, and he has never seen a bat light on, and there are no villains to do things. It seems that the people who live a comfortable life are really simple and honest. Soon, students came to report one after another, holding a pile of materials, and all Schiller had to do was register their names and dormitories. "Next," Schiller shouted without raising his head. There was already a whole line in front of him. A boy sat down and Schiller asked, "Name?" "Bruce Wayne." "Bruce. Room 306, Building 2, boys' apartment." Schiller wrote on his own. Suddenly the tip of the pen stopped, and he calmly raised his head and glanced at it. The boy was blue-eyed and black-haired, very handsome. Schiller said, "Wayne." "Indeed, I am Wayne." Schiller repeated. "Room 306, Building 2, boys' apartment, can't you hear it? Get your watch and leave quickly, the people behind are waiting for you." This time it was Bruce's turn to be stunned. He picked up the form and asked, "Which department are you a professor?" "Psychology. Don't take my class, boy," Schiller said. Bruce was aroused by him, but Schiller just wanted to scold his mother, co-authoring Batman and just started college. He said, "Why there is no bat light? Why is he so stubborn? When Batman goes to college, he transmigrates into a college teacher. He swears that he doesn't want to be involved in the life in Gotham City at all, he just wants to eat and wait to die and fish for a salary in the establishment position. Can Batman stop hitting me? I'm just an ordinary person." Schiller shouted in his heart that he had a full understanding of the danger of the Batman series of stories, and he didn't want to have anything to do with Bruce, especially the 18-year-old kid Bruce. A nasty dude. So Schiller was very indifferent and warned Bruce not to come to his class. He didn't want to hear the familiar voice of the clown appearing on the school radio one day. But it was this attitude that aroused Bruce's interest. He was Wayne, Gotham City's richest man. Why does this teacher seem to be indifferent to him, even disgusted? But Bruce didn't say anything. He picked up the form, thanked him, and left. Schiller finished his freshman reporting and was about to go back to the professor's apartment to sleep when he suddenly remembered that he had forgotten his keys in the office. Met a tall and thin professor, and Schiller said, "Hey, Jonathan, are you here to get something too?" "Yes, you forgot your keys in the office again." "Oh, that's right. Today, Anna urged me too quickly and forgot when I left. I'll come down as soon as I finish it. See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." At the moment when Schiller and Jonathan were in the wrong place, an icy chill climbed up his back. Jonathan. Jonathan Klein. Super criminal Scarecrow. Jonathan, who had his back to Schiller, didn't see Schiller looking back at him. If he hadn't learned today that Batman just went to college, he wouldn't have remembered it. The memory of the Scarecrow appeared in his mind. Gotham University psychology professor, Ph.D. in psychology and chemistry, Scarecrow of the future using fear gas to kill, Jonathan Klein. Schiller took a deep breath and continued to go upstairs with the same rhythm. Jonathan is not a Scarecrow now, because Bruce is only 18 years old, he has not graduated from college, and he has not yet become Batman. Jonathan is not famous in the world now. A high-level psychologist, only famous in the academic circle of emotional psychology, Schiller is now more famous than him. Schiller is now a world-class master of criminal psychology and abnormal psychology, a well-known psychological researcher, and Gotham's most famous psychology professor. So Jonathan's attitude was quite good just now. What's the use of that? Schiller can't develop poison gas. He's a pure liberal arts student, and Jonathan is a PhD in chemistry. Sure enough, I learned mathematics, physics and chemistry well, and I am not afraid to travel all over the world. Schiller's hands and feet were cold overnight. He knew very well that the curtain on the big stage of Gotham City was about to open, and now he was just a helpless scholar, a weak chicken who struggled to move a chair. Purely intellectual talents, let alone encounter these famous super criminals, they are the background boards in the comics, those gangsters, who can kill him with just a gun. And his worries became reality. Early the next morning, Schiller, who went to the school's psychology clinic as usual to catch fish, heard a crisp knock on the door just after brewing coffee. "Professor Schiller, may I come in?" Schiller took a deep breath. "Are there still students in this broken psychology clinic? I'm here purely to fish, okay. Paid vacation, understand, which is so ignorant." Outside is Bruce Wayne. Schiller almost spit out a sip of coffee, afraid of what's coming. Schiller could only grit his teeth and say, "Please take a seat, classmate, do you have any psychological problems that you would like to consult? Can't we come and talk if there is no problem?" Wayne spread his hands, and his style was undoubtedly revealed. Schiller pushed his glasses, resisting the feeling of killing the fool, trying to be old-fashioned and uninteresting to avoid arousing the protagonist's interest. He said, "This is the place for psychological counseling for the students. If you don't have any questions to ask, then you can leave." Schiller swears that his words are so boring that they are more perfunctory than the plain broadcast, but Bruce still asked with great interest, "Okay, then let me ask a question. What do you think is the meaning of life?" Schiller took a deep breath. He felt that he couldn't go on like this. Whether he answered perfunctorily or seriously, this young Batman made it clear that he didn't want to let him go, and he had to find a way to dispel him. Interest of God is pitiful. He is not the protagonist. Without the halo of the immortal protagonist, mixed with Batman, he will not survive 3 episodes. He hurriedly opened the Mime chat system in his mind. He remembered that he got a random chat opportunity because he guided Peter Parker's relationship issues before, and he quickly wrote in his mind. "A little brat who swears to take revenge on all criminals who have lost both parents and who still uses the appearance of to disguise himself. Now ask me what the meaning of life is. I want him to stop bothering me in the future. How to answer he. It's very urgent to wait online." Soon, a reply appeared. "I am a teacher. Regarding your question, I think you should be patient enough to give this unfortunate child psychological counseling from 2 aspects." Schiller wailed in his heart, "What kind of virgin is this here? This is Batman. Can I say, you want to open up?" Schiller looked at the name of the dialogue box. "Okay, Charles Xavier. Professor X. No wonder, the founder and principal of X Academy are really old-fashioned." But Schiller, who paid attention to the avatar, found that Charles's avatar could be clicked. He clicked on Charles's avatar in his mind, and a dialogue box popped up. The first chat can randomly copy an ability low level of the chat object, whether to copy. Quote. Schiller clicked yes, for no apparent reason. Telepathy low level is loaded. Schiller felt a blur in front of his eyes. Suddenly, countless noises came from Yu reading www.uakanshu.com, and countless unfamiliar emotions rushed into his mind, making it impossible for him to distinguish. After a while, Schiller realized that he was indeed gained part of Professor X's abilities. Telepathy is Charles's housekeeping skill, and with brainwave amplifiers, it can even brainwash all mankind, but Schiller's acquisition is only an extremely weakened version. He can only vaguely sense the other party's emotions, and some flashes in his heart suddenly. It is impossible to read the mind directly and clearly. But that was enough. Schiller focused on Bruce and found that he was in a messy mood right now. Yes, it wasn't that he was so cynical. According to Batman's life experience, he should have just returned from his studies in various countries, and he should have entered the university just to disguise his identity as Bruce. The real Batman has already hated this boring daily life, and every drop of his blood is in shouting, "Revenge, revenge on those criminals." In Bruce's eyes, the professor opposite seemed to suddenly fall into a kind of quiet thinking. Schiller has a pair of slightly special gray eyes. When Bruce was stared at by these eyes, his keen intuition began to call the police. He seemed to being spied on and seen through. Then, Schiller said, "Perhaps you have been waiting for someone to give you this answer, a positive answer. If you have more things to do after you get this answer, don't bother me again, then I am willing to give you this answer." Quote, "Oh, what is it?" "Vengeance." Schiller stared into Bruce's eyes and said, under Bruce's suddenly gloomy face, he stared straight at him and repeated, "The meaning of life is revenge." Ignoring Bruce's already gloomy expression like Gotham's sky, Schiller said, "Are you satisfied, Mr. Wayne?" If Schiller was to give a psychological profile to Batman in the comics, his greatest trait would not be prudence, wisdom, or strategizing, but paranoia. Batman never completely trusts anyone. His skepticism has come into its own. Skepticism and conspiracy theories have been etched in his bones, and he is as skeptical as he is smart. Schiller's answer obviously casts the young Batman into great suspicion. Bruce never thought that someone could see into his heart. He had great confidence in his disguise. Even the old housekeeper Ah-Fu, who raised him since he was a child, he felt that he only understood a part of him, not all of him. But this professor, this gentle-looking psychology professor who seemed to be a completely ordinary person, gave him the most impossible answer, but also the most accurate and sharp answer. Until the moment he got this answer, Bruce's inner surging and fiery told him that he was indeed waiting for someone to give him this answer. It was time to start revenge. But compared to the answer he got, the person who gave this answer made the blood of revenge he just ignited like being poured into a basin of cold water. Bruce didn't believe, never believed that someone could see what was hidden in his heart only by psychology. The devil, that swarm of shadowy bats. But Schiller said, "It's consultation time. I'm going to class. Goodbye, Mr. Wayne." Schiller believes that Bruce must be struggling for a long time. If he figured it out, hurry up as Batman to help justice. Don't take classes here. What else can Bruce take? Why bother with this group of dedicated faculty? Schiller thinks that he can probably figure it out. Those gangsters and criminal organizations will be enough of a headache for him, so that Schiller can stay in school and fish happily with pay, or fly to Hawaii for vacation. Schiller's reputation in school is not bad, because he has a great reputation, but that is the resume of the original owner. Schiller adheres to the principle of doing as many things as you pay for. As soon as the bell hits people, it disappears instantly, answering questions after class. Non-existent. He has been like this for the past 5 days. Fortunately, the original Schiller seems to be quite autistic and has no friends. He was hired as a professor at Gotham University in the past few months. Familiar, so the traveler Schiller did not reveal any flaws. During dinner in the afternoon, Peter sent a message, "Mr. Schiller, everything is so bad." With a frustrated chat expression, Schiller knew that this chat system was not brain-to-brain communication, only he used the system, and Peter met a netizen online by chance, and Charles was also there. Messages received from browsing educational forums in my spare time. The system will turn the chat with these characters into a form that they can accept. For example, Peter is through online social software, and Charles is a knowledge forum. If it is replaced by Thanos, it may be some kind of cosmic network signal or the like. So the other party will not feel awkward, and the system only guarantees that they will answer Schiller's first question, and how to chat afterwards. Schiller has to come, so Schiller's main chat object now is the young ignorant and ignorant little spider. For an old fox like Charles, Schiller would not be tempted easily when he was not completely sure. Schiller replied, "What's wrong, Peter?" "Not going well with Gwen." "Oh, it's really not going well, but that's not what it means to be bad." "What's that? Did you screw up your experiment?" "That's right. I knocked over a dangerous-looking experimental device, and one of the dangerous creatures inside ran out, and I was bitten by it." Schiller knew that Spider-Man's fate had been partially changed because of chatting with him. After chatting with him, he knew that the opposite was Spider-Man from the main universe of 616 comics. Originally, he, a high school student, should have been bitten when he went to the exhibition, but because Peter fell in love with Gwen, he told Schiller how charming and lovely his classmate Gwen was. Schiller was very annoyed by this small talk, so he gave him an idea and taught him how to chase Gwen. Gwen came from a good family and found an internship with the Osborn group during the summer vacation. It was nothing to Peter, but Schiller suggested that he be cheeky and apply for the same internship. Peter did well. Really, the application was submitted, but it turned out that it was not bitten by a spider in the exhibition, but was directly bitten by a spider of an experimental instrument from the Osborn group. Anyway, he had to be bitten, because Spider-Man was chosen by the weaving masters in the spider totem. If he was bitten today, he had to be bitten tomorrow. He had to take this bite both inside and outside. Schiller comforted the poor little spider and said went back to sleep. Gotham's night was dark and dark, perfect for sleep, and Bruce stayed up all night, looking at the moon that had almost lost its shape in the thick fog, holding a stack of files in his hand, the first page of which was named Schiller Andel Rodriguez. Schiller didn't know that he was checked by Batman. In a deep dream, he heard an alarm from the system, but he slept too deeply, and in ignorance, a blue light swept across. The system's alarm sound became more frequent, and Schiller still did not wake up. It seemed that something was blocking the system. Finally, after a chaotic sound, Schiller's figure disappeared directly. The emergency protection system is activated, the universe is located, the receiving universe has been determined, the identity information is being written, writing failed, writing successfully. When he woke up again, Schiller rubbed his eyes and was dazzled by the sunlight. Hell, it's actually sunny in Gotham City. As soon as the curtains are drawn, it's sunny outside. New York City. It's completely different from Gotham's rotten weather. New York is very sunny, and it's very sunny in the morning. Schiller looked through the window and found that he should be in a high-end apartment in the center of New York City. When he turned around, he saw a mess of things on his table, as well as a wine bottle, with a work card under the wine bottle. Schiller, New York Presbyterian Hospital psychiatrist, or the attending physician. I've crossed again. Hell, Schiller thought. Before he could scold his mother, his cell phone rang, picked it up, and said loudly, "Dr. Schiller. Where have you been? You must not be absent from the joint consultation today. Are you again drunk? Please come over immediately." Schiller's ears hurt from the shock, but when he thinks that he is a doctor now, there might be patients being rescued in such an emergency situation. Schiller immediately took his ID and went downstairs to look for a car. There was no reason to live in such a high-end apartment without a car. He found a fairly new Mercedes-Benz in the garage downstairs. It was the same model as his car key, opened. Thanks to Schiller for coming to New York for academic exchanges in the past life, and with the navigation in the car, I arrived at the Presbyterian Hospital, which is the largest hospital in New York, at the fastest speed. As soon as he entered, the girl at the front desk ran over quickly and said, "Drive, Schiller, hurry up, the joint consultation has already begun." Schiller didn't know what kind of character he was, he just nodded indifferently and went up. Fortunately, someone led the way, and Schiller came all the way to the conference room. When he saw him, the conference room was quiet for a while, and then the discussion continued. Schiller sat in the seat reserved for him, observing quietly. It seems that he should be a well-known doctor, and he is the first few in the undergraduate room. The person sitting opposite is obviously not a psychiatrist. One of the doctors looked arrogant and said, "Indeed, let the group of experts who pretend to be ghosts see first. It makes sense, lest he pretend to be crazy again and try to manipulate the nurses on the operating table." Schiller took a look at his famous brand, Stephen Strange, Dr. Strange. Well, he is coming to Marvel again. Schiller didn't bother to pay attention to him. Judging by Strange's appearance, he should have been away from the car accident early. Now this would be an extremely egoistic nuisance. Schiller looked at the medical records without saying a word, but Strange didn't like him. Without him, Schiller saw that he had drunk the day before and was late for the consultation the next day. You reading www.uakonchu. Strange is a bit of a clean freak, and he doesn't like Schiller's disrespectful attitude. Besides, he always thinks that all psychiatrists are acting like ghosts. In short, he hates Schiller. During the meeting, he kept picking on Schiller, but Schiller followed the script and ignored him at all. After the meeting, Strange bumped him on purpose. Schiller was very irritated by him, but after thinking about it, he will learn a lesson in the end. It is estimated that it has been a few years since his accident. If he is not so annoying, Schiller will probably remind him, but now, Strange should go to the plot by himself. Just after the consultation, Schiller turned on the phone and received a call. There was a nice female voice, but she was a little anxious. She asked, "Dr. Schiller, is your consultation over? You can come to Stark now. A trip to the building. Tony, he's not good. Tony Stark, when is this supposed to happen? Has Iron Man been kidnapped? Or is it already back?" Schiller didn't even have the time to check the information on the internet, because Stark's car had been dispatched to the downstairs of the hospital, so he could only get into the car quickly. The co-pilot sat a beautiful lady who looked a bit business-like. She said, "Since Tony came back, you know, when he was last diagnosed, he started throwing tantrums for no reason, doing all those crazy things, and I heard him cry last night." "Miss Pepper, are you okay?" Schiller asked tentatively. Pepper covered his eyes and said, "Sorry, but please be careful with this treatment." Schiller knew that now it should be Iron Man who was kidnapped and came back, and then he learned that his company's weapons were used in unjust wars, and himself, probably because of Stark's psychological struggle, Pepper was too worried and asked for help. Psychiatrist here. The Stark that Schiller saw was indeed on the verge of madness. His mental state was in a mess. With telepathy, Schiller could be shaken by his chaotic and tangled thoughts through the wall. Schiller took a deep breath and walked in. Stark raised his eyes and rolled his eyes, giving Schiller a big white eye. Although he looks a little haggard, he is not embarrassed, and the consequence of desperately trying to save face is that Schiller can feel that he is on the verge of collapse, but he is not willing to show it in front of Pepper. Schiller coughed. Pepper looked at Stark worriedly, then turned and left. Schiller sat opposite Stark, and Schiller said, "Mr. Stark, can I ask you a question?" Quote, "What do you want to ask? Talk to me about philosophy, pretending to be a ghost. Or talk about psychological theories that are useless at all." Cough, "No, I just wanted to ask what's my hourly wage." Stark was obviously stunned by this question, and he said in great surprise, "What did you say?" "I said I wanted to know the price of my counseling because I was drunk when Miss Pepper was talking to me about the price, and I woke up and forgot about it," Schiller said. Stark's native language is speechless at this time. He waved his hand and said, "You shouldn't choose an abstract topic that is commonly used by your psychiatrists. For example, the meaning of life, the object of sorrow, and the like." "Yes, that's the next step, after the consultation is officially started, but I have to make sure you can afford my counseling fee first." Stark's eyes widened, and he said in shock, "What did you say? Do you know who I am? God, what kind of primitive are you? Don't you know me? You don't know that this is Stark Building. Yes, I know you are rich, Mr. Stark, but how much money you have and how much you are willing to ask are two different things. How much do you want? $1 million an hour, no bargaining. For you, you Philistine mad doctor, are you crazy? $1 million, I can invite a dozen beauties on the yacht." I was in a trance to hear that someone said he was rich. Stark was literally speechless by Schiller, saying, "Are you Pepper sent to fix me? Good, go tell her. She made it. I already explained the party I had last time. Just to say goodbye to those ex-girlfriends, not wanting to do something else, why she just doesn't believe it." Schiller said, "A dozen beauties on a yacht won't make you any better, sir, especially when you feel like you're dying." Stark's exaggerated body movements stopped. He stiffened for a moment, and looked back at Schiller, his eyes suspicious. Schiller sat there calmly and said, "You are very afraid of death now, but perhaps the most fearful thing for you is not death, but the lack of a chance to redeem your mistakes." "Shit, who are you? Who are you?" Stark became emotional, and he said, "Did Pepper tell you something?" "No, she doesn't know, you." Stark stared straight at Schiller, and he said, "Don't play these ghost tricks with me. I don't believe there is any hellish mind reading in this world." "There is no mind reading in the world, only psychology," Schiller said. He stood up and said to Stark, "You can continue to be perfunctory. Anyway, my consultation fee is $1 million an hour. Let's grind for a while, and I can buy a new car." Stark was troubled by his serious talk for a while. He said, "How do you see that? With that ridiculous psychology? That's not important. What's important is that the only advice I can give you is that it's better to solve the problem of death first. Of course, you may think that I'm saying it simply. But the way is." Schiller stopped. Stark stared at him. Schiller said, "Pay a 50% deposit first, and then we will start the next treatment." Stark was smoke in his head, and he was laughing at Schiller. He picked up the phone and called Pepper and said, "My sweetheart, where did you get a vampire doctor?" "Yes, he gave. I opened a $1 million 1-hour consultation." Schiller directly grabbed the phone and said, "Miss Pepper, Mr. Stark's calculation of $1 million is a yacht's beauty." Then he hung up the phone, shook the phone and said, "The account will arrive in 5 minutes." Stark still stared at him. Stark crossed his arms and said, "Go ahead, I'll see what you can say. What have you been running away from?" What am I running away from? You'd better ask yourself. The answer is hidden in it. I'm not referring to Miss Pepper's life-threatening phone call, or an ambiguous text message from an ex-girlfriend. I'm serious." Schiller leaned on the table and hugged his arms. He pushed his glasses and said, "I have never seen such a rare case, very unique, very rare." Stark shuddered and said, "Hey, I don't like men, stay away from me." "You're not as absurd as you appear. I know someone very similar to you. He disguises himself as a playboy, like a fool who just gets along and never thinks about tomorrow. But he's smart, too smart, so he's been waiting for someone to give him an answer that comes from his past." Stark looked at Schiller, Schiller looked at him, and Stark whispered, "I'll give you $2 million, get out of here. I'll tell Pepper that your treatment is very effective. If I'm not mistaken, Miss Pepper is listening," said Schiller. Stark was silent, and Schiller said, "For $2 million, I'll tell you a method that really works. Make a deal. Your most taboo past has all the answers you want. I have seen it in the news. The founder of Stark Group, your father." "Enough," Stark said. He turned around. Schiller couldn't see his expression. Stark's voice trembled a little. He said, "Pepper will transfer you the consultation fee. Get out of here. He will be willing to give you a second life. God bless you. Leave here." After Schiller left, Stark smashed the wine glass on the table, and in the S.H.I.E.L.D. office, Nick Fury pressed his earphone and said, "Go and investigate a psychiatrist named Schiller. I want to get him right away. All the information." After Schiller left, the account quickly got a large sum of money. He thought happily, although Stark is difficult to deal with now, he is still willing to help this big dog solve his problems. And soon, there was another surprise, that is, Schiller found that he could replicate the abilities of Spider-Man. It turned out that the lack of this function before was not a system failure, but that Peter had not been bitten yet. Now that his spider ability has appeared, Schiller can naturally copy it. Schiller clicked to copy, and he got spider sensing low level. Compared to the momentary impact of telepathy, this time it seemed unremarkable. Schiller felt that his 5 senses were slightly improved, that is, he could see farther, more clearly heard. As for intuition, Schiller has not yet felt. He has some regrets. It would be great if he could have the physical fitness of Little Spider, but it is a weakened version anyway. It is estimated that it is to improve his athletic ability a little, and it is far from being able to reach the sky. Spider-Man didn't have that much power at the beginning. His spider abilities have gradually developed. At present, it seems that he is just a little more than ordinary people, and it is not too exaggerated. But since the story of Spider-Man has begun, Peter's uncle may have an accident. Schiller thought about it, and sent a message to Peter. He said, "How are you? Do you want to come to the hospital? He is a doctor and can introduce you to a reliable trauma doctor." Peter's reply came quickly. He said, "Wow. You're a doctor, cool. What hospital do you work at? What doctor? Or an orthopedic surgeon? But I don't think I need a surgeon anymore. You reading www.uakanshu.com. I'm very happy now. I think Gwen will agree to my pursuit soon." Schiller said, "I advise you to come and check it out. Being bitten by an animal is not a joke. It just so happens that we can also meet." Peter was obviously hesitant. After all, it's not a good idea to meet netizens at this time. He just got the spider ability, and he was so excited that he didn't want to do anything else at all. Schiller said, I think you can bring Miss Gwen with me, I'm here. Presbyterian Hospital, I can give you a free full medical examination, and then you can go to the nearby coffee shop. Peter was a little tempted. First, his family was not in a good condition and he didn't have the opportunity to do a physical examination, and there was no New Yorker who had never heard of the name of the Presbyterian Hospital. He said, thank you, but I want to take my uncle and aunt with me. They're getting older, of course, that's probably a bit too much. If it doesn't work, pretend I didn't say it. Schiller thought about it. Maybe it's better, he said, okay, I'll help you make an appointment for this weekend. You can also try to call Miss Gwen and her family. I have plenty of places to make an appointment. Peter happily went to call Gwen. You know, he has been helped by Gwen, because his family conditions are not very good. Gwen always brings him snacks and yogurt. Peter always feels that he can't help Gwen. I've been busy, so I've always felt guilty. But this is a good opportunity for compensation. Presbyterian hospitals are not so easy to get into. Even if Gwen's father is the commissioner of the New York Police Department, if he wants to make an appointment for a comprehensive medical examination, he will have to queue for a long time, or he will not be able to make an appointment at all. Peter thinks that he has been very smooth recently. First of all, he has superpowers. A friend he met on the internet is a doctor in a big hospital. He seems to be the attending doctor. When Schiller woke up, he didn't need to turn over. He knew that he must have returned to the simple and unsophisticated Gotham City, because the smell of kerosene in the air and the never-sunny day outside the window told him that he had come back again. And time didn't run out at all. He turned off the alarm clock and glanced at the calendar. It was the second day of the night he traveled to Marvel, which means that the time in the 600th world didn't go away when he went to Marvel. Schiller sighed. For a while, he didn't know whether Gotham City, with its simple folk customs, was more dangerous, or New York City, the center of the universe, was more dangerous. Feeling conscious, he said that although New York is more enjoyable, Gotham is forever home. At least the cosmic mode has not been turned on here for the time being, and Schiller can't deal with the purple potato essence now. He turned over and got dressed. Gotham University requires professors to wear formal attire to class, so Schiller wears a shirt, vest and suit every day, sometimes changing the style of the suit, or wearing a trench coat. The temperature of Gotham in September is not bad, not cold, maybe because it is a coastal city, the city is still warm with the breeze blowing. As soon as Schiller left the house, he saw someone he didn't want to see, Bruce Wayne. Schiller turned his head and walked back. Bruce quickly caught up and shouted, Professor! Professor, I have some psychological questions I want to ask you. Can you wait for me? Schiller scolded secretly. There will be many teachers near the professor's apartment, and Schiller can't just refuse. He can only say, okay, I'm not deaf, Mr. Wayne, let's go to the counseling room. Speak. So the two entered the counseling room. Instead of sitting down, Bruce took the initiative to make coffee. He took the hot coffee and put it in front of Schiller. He said, Schiller Andel Rodriguez, a world-renowned criminal psychologist, holds 4 PhD degrees in psychology, and has participated in the famous Red Gloves massacre in Imperial City, the Red Gloves serial murder in Imperial City, the investigation and detection of the case of the underground corpse in the seaside city, and, most importantly, 4 months ago, he resigned during the trial of the deputy mayor of the metropolis and accepted the invitation of Gotham University. Professor Schiller, can you tell me why you came to Gotham? Schiller's hair stood on end. My dear, the original owner's resume can be directly sorted into Arkham Asylum. You can't do a clown. You have participated in more than one such terrifying case. You are also involved in a string. Bruce still kept it and said it, right. Schiller scolded his mother inwardly, but he still had no expression on the surface. He took a sip of coffee and said, Gotham is a good place. Really, the city with the highest crime rate in America. That's not important. Oh, the crime rate in the metropolis is not high. Kid, sit down, you think the metropolis is safer than Gotham, right? Isn't it? At least not for me, Schiller said. Schiller came to inherit the knowledge and ability of the original owner, but the memory, he suspects that the original owner had lost some important memories before he crossed. At least now Schiller can't remember any details about those horrific cases, it seems a little vague. A vague shadow, but I can't recall it at all. Schiller knew that the original owner must have been involved in an indescribably complicated case, and then had been plotted against. Schiller said, "The security you see is only the appearance, Mr. Wayne. Behind that, behind the splendor of the metropolis, there is darkness that you may not be able to imagine." Then why did you come to Gotham City? I think you've checked my resume, but it's still not detailed enough. I've offended too many people. Only here is safe. Why, only criminals can deal with criminals, Schiller said. Bruce Wayne seemed to be shocked by this sentence. He said, "Only criminals can deal with criminals, right? Professor, is that what you think?" "Bruce, let's change the subject," Schiller said. Bruce looked at him, his eyes gloomy like the sky of Gotham City, and Schiller realized that he was no longer facing the cynical Bruce, but Batman, the most complicated superhero in history, the dark hero, an incomprehensible paranoid genius who is just a fine line from the lunatic. "If you want more from me, you have to pay the price," Schiller said. "What do you want?" Bruce asked. "You can't give what I want now. You should understand what I mean," Schiller said. "Then I can give it later, right? It must be possible." Bruce restrained his expression, and no one could see what he was thinking. He said, "Professor Schiller, unfortunately, there are some gadgets I made in your coffee, a nanovirus." "Bruce, being dishonest won't get you more from me, kid, it's not a trick you use to ask for candy," Schiller said. "Looks like I'm doomed to come back today," Bruce said. "Not necessarily," Schiller said. "I hope you can give me a good enough grade in the final test, Bruce, prove that you have the heart to learn this skill, and then come back to me," Schiller said. "I won't waste any more time here," Bruce said. "You're far from being a teacher, Bruce, you're still a student," Schiller said. "I have learned knowledge and skills from all over the world, hundreds of fighting skills, detective, lockpicking, anti-reconnaissance." "You haven't learned Gotham, except Gotham," Schiller said. Bruce is silent. Schiller has already seen that Bruce is not yet the dark hero Batman in the later period. Indeed, the idea of revenge and execution of justice has always been in his heart, and there may be a darker side, but he has not yet understood Gotham. What is this human hell? Bruce wants to use all available power, such as this Professor Schiller. Batman is a hero with almost no weaknesses. He is wise and close to demons, cautious and meticulous, and he is comparable to gods in the mortal body, but the premise is that he must first put on that bat suit and become a dark knight who spreads fear in the night. Grab Gotham with all the evil here, and make the determination to face and fight all filthy humanity, and now. Bruce is not yet Batman, he has weaknesses. Schiller suddenly felt fortunate. If he really faced the Dark Knight standing in the shadow of Gotham, maybe all his methods would not be useful, because Batman is not a Superman, he is not a righteous hero, he is a thoroughgoing outlaw. After Bruce left, Schiller stood by the window for a long time. Maybe Batman will come soon, and Bruce can't wait any longer. The next day, Schiller went to class as usual, and it was the first class for freshmen. Unfortunately, his actions to prevent Bruce from choosing psychology were unsuccessful. This young Batman had to appear in Schiller's peaceful life to remind him he is about to become a mess here. But the strange thing is that Schiller found that Bruce was limping. His right foot seemed to be injured, but he insisted on coming to the class. Schiller was thinking while lecturing, why did Bruce go? He is sitting on a fortune of billions, and Gotham City is the old Wayne's family. Is it possible that he can still be beaten by thugs? After class, Schiller rejected Bruce's obvious, "let's talk," suggestion. He quickly put away the books and courseware, and then left with the crowd of students. He had to go out at night. If Gotham City is hell, then Gotham City at night should be afraid even if Satan sees it. This crime city has never stopped the aftermath of crime. Schiller left the safe university and really walked into Gotham City. He's stalking Jonathan the Scarecrow. Jonathan is not a normal person. He has been committing murder since he was 18, so even if he is not a scarecrow now, he has already started his fear gas experiment. Schiller didn't come to do justice to stop him, he wanted to get some fear gas to protect himself. In this dangerous city, a chemist secretly made the laboratory the safest place for theft. At least Jonathan and Schiller are both civilians, not gangsters, and they can't use fighting and firearms. Only with the mind. This night, it was raining again in Gotham. The night was as dark as thick ink, and the rain had a strong smell of kerosene. No matter how warm it was here, the cold September rain was still freezing, and Schiller was wearing a long trench coat. Holding a black umbrella and walking through a narrow street, he has gradually reached the location where Jonathan hid the poisonous gas, which is an abandoned church underground in a block. As long as Jonathan is away, Schiller can logically go in and get it. Fear of poison gas. Suddenly, Schiller's heart began to beat fast, and a picture of him being hit by an unknown hidden weapon flashed in front of his eyes. He turned around instantly and opened the umbrella with a bang. The two hidden weapons failed to penetrate his umbrella and fell to the ground. Spider sense saved Schiller's life. Schiller put down the umbrella slowly. His face was not as gentle as the day, and he almost died. Anyone who has just been attacked by death will hardly have a good face. At the end of the alley, Bruce in a bat suit sees his precision-guided and extremely fast darts, which are instantly blocked by the mysterious man's umbrella. It's as fast as predicted in advance. And the black umbrella with rain was put down, revealing a face that Bruce is very familiar with, that is his university professor, Schiller. It's really him, but it doesn't seem to be. Schiller's temperament is completely different from that of Baitian. At this time, Schiller is more like the man Bruce saw in his resume, a lunatic who is addicted to criminal psychology. Schiller took a deep breath and said, "You should know what would have happened if I didn't block it. The dart will stop when it is 30 centimeters away from you," Batman said. Bruce's voice was also completely different from daytime, and Schiller knew he had used a voice changer. At this time, Batman is still far from good. His bat suit is not mature enough, he has no cape and belt, and his bat darts don't seem to be very easy to use. It can be seen that the fledgling Batman should have gone through some detours. The thing starts from Gotham, that is, the novice directly challenges the difficulty of hell. Schiller said, "I want to remind you, Mr. Bat, that you reading www.uakanshu.com is different from the wealthy area you live in. There is no protective fence on the roof of the Mawson block. If you accidentally fall again, you may get internal organs rupture." The shadow on the opposite side was silent, and he asked, "How did you see it?" "You're still too tender, Mr. Hero. The medicine you use has almost no taste, it's a high-end chemical, not something the poor ghouls can afford, and..." Schiller's eyes fell on Bruce's only exposed chin on. He said, "No one here shaves so neatly and symmetrically." "Who are you?" Batman asked. Schiller opened the umbrella again, and he said, "Go home quickly, young master, no one will answer every question you have. I'm not a novice tutor." After speaking, he left in the rain. Batman stood in that alley for a long time. He limped out, turned into another street, and saw a beggar, shivering in the rain. He took out a stack of money and handed it to the beggar, and then he heard the sound of leather shoes stepping on the rain behind him, and a sentence that made his hair stand on end. "That's why I said you don't understand Gotham, Bruce." Batman turned around and saw Schiller standing at the intersection. Schiller walked over, handed the umbrella to the beggar. The beggar took the umbrella and opened it to cover the icy rain, then she trembled and returned the stack of dollars to Batman. "Why?" Batman asked, taking the dollar. "Because this is the gutter gang's territory. If they knew she had such a large sum of dollars, her body would be in the gutter the next day." "A lot of dollars." Batman's voice betrayed absurdity. $37. "Yes." Schiller looked at the end of the street and said, "This is Gotham. Welcome to Gotham." Schiller discovered that he could traverse the two worlds of Marvel and DC in deep sleep. At present, he has not been able to replicate this ability. But fortunately, he traveled to Marvel, and DC's time is not moving, and his experience in the Marvel world is more like a dream. And when he traveled back to Marvel again, he found that the time in Marvel's world is fluid. He stayed in DC for a day and a night, and then a day and a night passed in Marvel. This is a little troublesome, Schiller thought. He was afraid that he missed a day of work yesterday. It won't go on like this, even if Schiller is not a physique that can pass through the chaos that occurs every 3 or 5 times in Marvel. New York City is doomed that he can't go to work from 9 to 5, not to mention the Presbyterian psychiatry department is very busy, requiring psychological. The number of people consulted is outrageous. When Schiller was thinking about resigning, he suddenly received a chat from Charles. "Is the child you instructed okay now?" "No, not only is it not good, he also fell from the upstairs." Schiller replied. Obviously, Bruce's road to Batman didn't start so smoothly. Charles was obviously shocked. He said, the kid jumped off the building. Why? Did your psychological counseling work? He had some accidents, but the injury was not serious. I am trying to solve this problem. I recently encountered two similar cases. They have a completely unbearable obsession with the past, but one chose revenge. The other is still running away. In a sense, Iron Man and Batman are somewhat similar. They are both billionaires, they are both playboys, and they both research and equip themselves to become superheroes. More similar, they are both right, there is an obsession with the past that can't be let go. And this obsession is the death of the parents. Perhaps Iron Man is less obvious, but his feelings for his father are more complicated than Batman's. Are you a pediatrician, responsible for the psychological counseling of children? Or which hospital do you work in? Charles asked. No, I'm a psychiatrist, a psychologist. These are the cases I study. I think you should give them more care in addition to research, whether they are your patients or not. I always believe that if a person has talent in a certain area, he should use this talent to make the world a better place. It is good. Schiller sighed and did not reply to Charles. The social problem of mutants is too heavy and difficult to solve. From a sociological point of view, this is an unsolvable dead end. After thinking for a long time, Schiller became in a bad mood, so he decided to toss Stark. He called Pepper and said, Miss Pepper, I think yesterday's clinic has had some results. Mr. Schiller, I really don't know how to thank you. Tony, he finally stopped being bored in the house today. He went to the lab. Thank goodness. I used to think it was bad for him to stay in the lab all the time, but now I'm so happy. The opposite Pepper was obviously a little excited. The strong woman couldn't help feeling a little bit when she mentioned Tony. Schiller comforted her and said, I think I should go again today to consolidate the results of yesterday's treatment in time. The special car from Stark Industries arrived at the downstairs of Schiller's apartment in a few minutes. After Schiller got into the car, he found that it was still a driverless high-end cargo, and the control panel of the car made a sound. Hello, Mr. Schiller. I'm Jarvis. Hello, Jarvis. Jarvis didn't seem to have been responded to in this way, and then Schiller asked, do you understand the concept of I? If you're referring to the psychological concept of id, then I think I know something, Jarvis said. Now Jarvis doesn't seem to be that smart. After all, Tony hasn't completely gotten out of the predicament and hasn't upgraded the smart housekeeper yet. Schiller asked again, do you have an self? I think I have. Did Stark create this concept for you? I think so, sir. Then he is your father and creator. He created your personality and feelings for you. He should hope you have the same ability to think alone as a human being, right? Perhaps yes. Then if one day, Stark is dying, and one of your decisions can save your master, but he himself is strongly against it, what are you going to do? Jarvis was silent for a while, and said, I am an intelligent life created by Mr. Stark, and everything is based on Mr. Stark's orders as the highest criterion. If you obeyed the order and didn't save him, and he died, would you regret it? Jarvis was silent longer, saying, I'm not sure, I can't assume that future. If he died, do you think he would regret creating you before he died? If he died, do you think he would hate you? If he resents you, will you blame yourself? If you were given another chance to start over, would you make a different choice? If you disobeyed Stark's order and chose to save him, and he blamed you afterwards, would you feel resentful? If you disobeyed Stark's orders to save him, and he wants to destroy you because you disobeyed the order, would you resent him? There was silence in the carriage, and after a while, there were sizzling electric currents and Stark's somewhat collapsed voice. Hello, hey, what's wrong with you, Jarvis? What did you do to my smart housekeeper? Why did he crash? Hey. Schiller felt a good mood, and sure enough, others were also uncomfortable, so he felt a lot better. After a while, at the Stark building, Schiller didn't go to Stark's office, but was led directly to the laboratory. Stark looked like he hadn't slept for several nights, and was in a state of embarrassment. Crazy with a computer. Oh, isn't that Mr. Schiller, our genius psychologist? I really should get a Pulitzer for that interview you just did in the car. You use a bunch of ghosts when I need smart calculating data. The question blew up my smart housekeeper. Stark yelled. Don't thank me, I'll give you the electronic life counseling for free. There's no charge. Schiller spread his hands and said. Stark took a deep breath, stood up, and shouted, Mark II. A set of silver battle suits flew over in an instant, the mechanical cas sounded, and the arming was completed almost instantly. Iron Man lurked in midair, showing off his silver Mark II armor. Obviously, he has not been white these days. Busy. Mr. Stark, we are a psychiatrist, not a boxing fight. You don't have to wear such thick clothes to talk to me. Hey, didn't you see what I'm wearing? Yes, I see, I'm not blind. A set of cross-era battle armor appears in front of you, can you give some reaction? Do you know what this set of battle armor means? Schiller found a table and sat down on his own, opened his medical record book, and said, I know, Mr. Stark, you have made great progress in technology, which is gratifying. But I see this armor. The suspension function is familiar. It seems that the suspension car launched by Howard Motors has the same purpose. Shut up. Don't mention that name. Stark's armor mask rose, he fell to the ground, and Schiller said as he wrote, Can we start today's treatment? You know I don't need any psychotherapy. Also, because you broke my Jarvis, the loss is deducted from your consultation bill today, exactly $2 million, and we'll talk about other things in the next 2 hours. Quote. I didn't break Jarvis, I just told you in advance the danger of electronic life. Schiller said. Aren't you the kind of ultra-conservative? You think artificial intelligence will destroy the world? Stark sat across from him and asked. Schiller shook his head and said, Although my psychological consultation for electronic life is free now, it is only free this time. If you still need me to conduct psychological analysis for electronic life in the future, the consultation fee is 2 million yuan. Dollars an hour. Dr. Vampire shit, Stark said. This is the American healthcare system, Schiller said. Anyway, when Ultron comes out, Stark still has to find him. Okay, let's talk about business. Where did you hear about my father? Actually, I don't know, but all this can be deduced. First of all, the fact that you are dying is almost written on your face. It's hard for me to not see it. Iron Man touched his face, and the armor mask closed with a click. Miss Pepper didn't tell me much about the details of your kidnapping, but in short, you invented a very powerful thing and ran out. You can still walk, which means that you were not seriously injured physically. I am not interested in learning about your strange technologies, but I know that if you want to escape from the kidnappers single-handedly, you must use some special means. Combined with your rotten face like shit, I'm afraid it's this method that brought you the situation you are today. You reading www.uakanshu.com. Anyway, if you don't stop, you will die. You already know who you can turn to for help, but you just don't want to face it. Combined with some news of the death of the founder of Stark Industries, I'm sure your childhood may have been psychologically traumatized. In this case, of course I will give a suggestion that a doctor in my heart should give, which is to face the past, such as looking for your father's relics, trying to reconcile with childhood trauma, etc. This will at least help you think rationally. Quote. What nonsense. Stark concluded. Schiller spread his hands. He is indeed talking nonsense, because he is a traveler, spoilers, and he knows almost the plot, so it is not all right. After several days of inquiries and observations, Schiller felt that this should be a mixture of the 616 comics main universe, TRN 688 Sony universe and MCU movie universe. Because even if Peter's life trajectory was changed by Schiller, he was still bitten, which proves that there must be a spider totem here, then there must be other parallel Earths, so it is not a simple MCU universe, that a lot of parallel Earths, the Earth where the heirs, exiles, and Spider-Gwen are located still exists. The Sony universe is also very good at inferring that the mutants exist when you go online, but there are no mutants in the pure MCU. In short, Schiller himself regards this place as a brand new hybrid Marvel universe, but no matter how it is mixed, the transformation of Iron Man is an important node in the entire universe, and its background story is roughly the same. Anyway, only the mecha is made in Vietnam. It's still made in Afghanistan, and it's just the difference between how it's owned. When he went to bed at night, Schiller found that he could actually stay in Marvel all the time. He could take a nap, go back to DC, continue to sleep in DC, and then go back to Marvel again. He can stay in Marvel all the time and not smoke the smog of Gotham City. But the good times didn't last long. Before Schiller took Peter and his family for a medical checkup, S.H.I.E.L.D. came to the door. It was another day of work. Schiller had just finished checking the room and was using the doctor's internal system to help Peter's family make an appointment for a medical examination. There was a knock on the door of his office. Schiller sat behind the desk and didn't look up. Suddenly the spider sensor vibrated. For a moment, he looked up vigilantly and saw a strange man standing in front of the door. "Hey, doctor, don't be nervous, I'm Coulson, an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. The man looked at Tiller's nervous posture, and Schiller glanced at him over his glasses and said, "Let's go out and say, this is all mine, patient." Coulson hurriedly nodded. The two went downstairs together, and sat down in the cafe next to the hospital. Schiller frowned and said, "Is there no one in your S.H.I.E.L.D.? Or is it a good idea to find a female agent who can wear a nurse uniform?" Difficulty. Coulson was a little puzzled about Schiller's attitude. Shouldn't ordinary people show fear or rejection of this kind of scenario where agents suddenly come to the door? It seems that the boss is right, there is definitely something wrong with this Schiller. Schiller showed a little impatient. He said, "I've been late for a day and absent from work for a day. The whole clinic knows that I stay up late, drink alcohol and take drugs. If you insist on making trouble for me, can you wait for this to pass? Besides, I'll be fired. According to our information, you are only a psychological consultant temporarily hired by the Presbyterian Hospital, and you only replaced the shift because the director of the psychiatry department was away. Is that important? I really need this job now. What if you cause me to lose my job?" Coulson said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Schiller, we didn't mean to disturb you, but we heard that you were Mr. Stark's psychological counselor, and we wanted to know more about his psychological condition. Of course, we will pay the consultation fee on time. $1 million an hour. PFF." Coulson spit out a sip of coffee. He wiped his mouth and said, "If you refuse, you don't need to make such an excuse. If you can't afford it, see less doctors." Schiller rolled his eyes, got up and was about to leave, acting like an unscrupulous quack doctor. Coulson didn't even stop him. After Schiller left, he pressed his earphone and said, "I'm afraid there's something tricky in that hospital. He took me away in a hurry, and he was in a hurry to go back." Okay. Schiller returned to the consultation room. He concentrated his attention, turned on his telepathy to the maximum, and then felt the emotions of those mentally ill patients, and expressed some emotions in words as much as possible. The inner world of a group of mentally ill patients is really very chaotic, crazy. Schiller scribbled a dozen pages and locked it in a drawer. After he returned to the apartment in the evening, he found that an agent had come to search it. Schiller used the spider sensor to scan it, but he didn't find any bugs or cameras, so he didn't care. In S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury stared at the glowing data panel with Schiller's details, and Coulson said behind him, "He's very nervous about his job, doesn't seem to want to leave that hospital. A lot of wine bottles were found in the house, and some medicines. Here's some paper we found in his office tonight. Only these, he seems to have disposed of them urgently, because we found a lot of pulp washed down by the shredder in the sewer, but unfortunately it can't be recovered." Nick took the papers and said, "He has a mental illness." "No, these don't seem like the babble of a single person. He collects psychological data from mental patients in the psychiatry department. How did he communicate with those mental patients? These are obviously not information that ordinary doctors can get, and these records even contain the extreme privacy of patients." "He can hypnotize," Coulson said. "Our psychiatrist does too. Can he tell you what color underwear you like to wear in elementary school?" Nick said. "Maybe he just made it up," Coulson said. "He seems to have extra knowledge of Stark's industrial past, and our old friend, and he can hit Stark's weaknesses head-on, and today seems to have caused Stark's smart housekeeper to fall into a logical deadlock." Nick said, "You want him to work for us? He has a very good way to deal with Stark, and we will have more such people to deal with in the future." Nick put the stack of documents aside and said, "Anyway, first find out what is in the hospital, move him out of there if possible. I hate this group of high-level intellectuals the most. They are always too calm, cautious and incomprehensible. Such opponents who know how to use their brains are difficult to deal with." Nick said, "Maybe he is just an ordinary psychiatrist, and collecting the crazy words of those patients is his hobby." Coulson said. "Coulson, you sometimes make me suspect that your rank of 8th level agent is very watery," Nick said. A guy who can make Stark completely lose his temper in 30 minutes and swagger into Stark Industries the next day. Do you think he is an ordinary psychiatrist? Or do you think Tony Stark is really a cynical who just hangs around and models? Understood. I will let him leave that hospital first, Coulson said. So, the next day, Schiller received the news of his dismissal in Stark's office, and he spread his hands and said, "Look, I absolutely need your funding, Mr. Stark, and neither do you. Would you just watch your dedicated psychologist lose your job and go bankrupt?" Stark said, $2 million isn't enough for you to open your own psychiatry clinic. Money is not the problem is the qualifications required by the psychological clinic. I need to open a legal psychological clinic, not a liar institution that is no different from divination on the street. Can't you apply with your resume? Jarvis told me yesterday that you have 3 doctorates and have worked in the best hospitals in 6 states. Yes, but the location of the psychological clinic I want to open is rather special, Schiller said after taking a sip of ice wine. Where is it? Said Stark as he tinkered with the machine. Hell's Kitchen, Schiller said. Stark shook his hand, and the poor Mark II burst into a series of sparks, and he said, I really can't see that you still have the kind heart of a Virgin Mary, and you want to save the block. The poor and poisonous ghosts. Schiller didn't say much. He said, I need a psychiatric clinic legally opened in Hell's Kitchen. For this, I can grant you a request. Schiller puts the emphasis on the word, legal. Stark said, am I going to ask you to help you with anything? Oh, what a joke, I'm Stark. Don't you want to know if Pepper really likes you? Stark shook his hand again, and the Mark II exploded directly on his right leg. Schiller took a step back silently, looking at Stark whose face was blackened. He rubbed his face in a panic and said, you say what? What happened to Pepper? Obviously, Stark hasn't realized his feelings for Pepper yet. I can tell you at the right time whether Pepper really loves you. I promise to be accurate. You have seen my ability. Of course Pepper loves me, and women all over the world love Stark, Stark said. Is she just one of the women in the world? Nothing special, Schiller asked. Stark was silent. I can promise you, of course, you won't have to give me any psychological counseling from tomorrow. If Pepper comes to you, you will shirk it. Can't you pay the consultation fee? Stark was like a cat whose tail had been stomped on, and said loudly, I can afford you even if you ask $10 million for an hour. I just don't need any psychological counseling. I'm not crazy. I'm fine. Schiller shook his head and said slowly, I'm afraid Mark II doesn't think so. He and Stark looked down at the armor with one missing leg at the same time. You reading www.uaconchu.com. Stark pointed at the door, leave now. Schiller returned to his home, and he sent a message to Peter. The medical examination for the weekend has been scheduled. I will say hello to the hospital and let them provide you with attentive service, but the time of our meeting may be postponed because I've already resigned from that hospital. Peter quickly expressed his concern, but Schiller just said that it was a change in his career plan and didn't say much, and Peter was a little moved. After all, after leaving the company, he could still think about the medical examination that he had ordered before, and he said eagerly, you are still in New York. If it's still there, I think we can meet up for a meal or something, or you can come to my house. Schiller declined Peter and sent a message to Charles, what if I open a hospital in hell? I'm afraid the devil won't take your favor. You seem to be deeply touched by this. I advise you not to do this. Maybe you are just a talented ordinary person, but ordinary people can't resist the devil. But only criminals can fight criminals, aren't they? Charles on the computer side fell into silence after watching this sentence. He thought, Marx, do you think so too? Only by turning yourself into a criminal can you deal with the most vicious criminals. Charles shook his head. No, justice must have its fair way of realizing it. If you can only fight against the devil by throwing yourself into hell, it is no different from complicity. Outside the window, the students of Xavier's school for gifted boys were chasing and making trouble on the playground. Storm was berating them for going back to class, while Jin was watching. Everything seemed beautiful. It's just that Xavier knows that the shadow of the Dark Phoenix is far from leaving. Schiller was on his way back to the apartment again. He could clearly feel that someone was following him. The improved vision brought about by spider sensing allowed him to see that someone was looking at him across the apartment building. The apartment building opposite is an all-glass structure, and there is a small pane in it that reflects light differently from other places, so Schillerming felt it keenly. It is not for nothing that he chose to open a clinic in Hell's Kitchen. After several days of observation, he has basically figured out the work and rest rules of the residents in the apartment building. Most of the people who live here are office workers and elite golden-collar workers. Most of them are single, with very regular working hours and a fixed circle of friends. Living in such a crowd, it is too easy for special agents to find flaws. Hell's Kitchen is different. Although it is the largest gathering place for gangsters in Manhattan, New York and even the United States, it has a high population density, a large flow of people, and a large number of unfamiliar people. Moreover, gangs of all sizes are nested and entrenched. It's the perfect place for an outsider like Schiller who wants to fish in troubled waters. Living in a condo is comfortable, but not necessarily the freedom of Hell's Kitchen. Schiller believed that if he stayed in that apartment for a few more days, at least 4 or 5 of the neighbors around him would become agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to extract some information. It may be his own, or it may be Stark's. This is the way S.H.I.E.L.D. does things. They don't care whether you need privacy or not. And Hell's Kitchen is slightly different from Gotham. Although there are countless gangsters, big and small, Hell's Kitchen is less dangerous than Gotham. There are more poor people, gamblers and addicts, no scarecrows and clowns, and no big villains. The vast majority of people there are still ordinary people. Although guns and drugs are rampant, the victims are more ordinary people, not special people with special abilities. Schiller intends to use it as his first stronghold in Marvel. Stark's work efficiency is very high, and it didn't take long for him to try to incite some congressmen to allocate a hospital quota and put it in Hell's Kitchen. Some MPs took this opportunity to trumpet their kindness. It is claimed that New York will not give up any of the people, but they never expected this hospital to really open. You know, it is Hell's Kitchen, where even the devil goes to be cooked. Where to open a hospital? Don't make any jokes, unless the hospital can be built like a concentration camp, with tanks and cannons piled up at the entrance, and the doctors and nurses inside are all carrying machine guns. Maybe there is still some hope, otherwise all the medicines there are overnight. The space will be emptied. But no matter how disbelieving the congressmen and how numb the people in Hell's Kitchen were, a small psychological clinic was established in Hell's Kitchen. As the most well-known and largest slum in Manhattan, the 8 blocks here are just a code name. In fact, this place is far wider than the range of 8 blocks. There are dozens of streets, large and small, intricately, and there are about hundreds of gangsters crisscrossing here. Some people say that the boss of Hell's Kitchen is Jin Bing, but that's not the case. In fact, Jin's business scope extends far beyond Hell's Kitchen. The entire eastern United States and even the East Coast has his criminal industry chain. His business spans the United States. Hell's Kitchen may be involved in some of his drug industry and smuggling product business, but he doesn't actually live here, nor does he keep an eye on it all the time. Daredevil, who was born in Hell's Kitchen, is his nemesis, but they hardly ever put the battlefield in Hell's Kitchen. Little Spider, who has fought with Jin Ping several times, is just an ignorant high school student at this time. Jin Bing's ambition goes far beyond unifying Hell's Kitchen, and he doesn't care about the chaos that broke out in Hell's Kitchen. Because there are all kinds of riots, robberies, kidnappings, brawls, and missing persons cases here every day, and some disturbances are nothing at all. Therefore, when King Jin, who was far away in San Francisco, heard that some of his subordinates had lost their minds in Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan, he only thought that they were just taking too many drugs, and he didn't take it to heart at all. But in Hell's Kitchen, a terrible story gradually spread. They heard that in the psychological clinic opened at the end of Mary Street, 9th and Lane, there lived a terrible strange doctor. The members of the gang that he received protection money or blackmailed all ran out in horror after a while, and then went crazy. When this incident first started, several well-known gang bosses did not believe in evil, and once led their subordinates in. But it didn't take long for them to meet some monsters. Crazy began to fight with the air, struggling, screaming, running, crying, like being possessed by some ghost. This incident caused quite a stir. Almost all of Mary Street heard about it, and rumors spread quickly. 1 past 10, 10 past 100, everyone has heard that 9th and Alley must not go. There is a terrible curse, it will make you see the most feared things in your heart, and finally you will be frightened and go crazy. Later, Schiller, who lived there, began to go out. Everyone heard that he was the owner of the clinic who lived in Ninth End Lane. People realized that it was not a ghost, but a weird psychiatrist. According to Schiller's explanation, the group of gang bosses did too many bad things, and he just gave them some friendly psychological counseling. As for why they get crazy, maybe it's evil. The people in Hell's Kitchen would believe what he said to hell, but for those who live here, the wicked will have good rewards. It is their consensus. No one who was born in Hell's Kitchen would feel guilty. It's normal to commit crimes here, and criminals are the majority of people here. Guilty. What conscience do you expect from someone who has been selling guns, drugs, fighting, threatening extortion and gambling since he was a teenager? How can such a person be so guilty? Will you still go crazy? Everyone who heard about this thought that Schiller was a black magician, so he could put a curse on those people. And Schiller, he wouldn't explain it. The fear gas brought from DC is really useful. Although it is only the initial version, it is still very effective against ordinary people who have no abilities. From the moment he discovered that he could travel between the two worlds by holding things in his hands and carrying things outside himself, he had the idea of destroying the Lord. Although the power systems of Marvel and DC are different, there are many things that can be sold to each other. Of course, there are many things that can be exchanged with each other to deal with the enemies of both sides. For example, if Schiller used fear gas in Gotham, once the news spread and Jonathan saw the symptoms of those patients, he would definitely think that it was his own fear gas. But in Marvel, how could Jonathan know about Marvel? Naturally, Schiller would not have to pay any royalties. Since the spread of such terrifying rumors, almost no gangsters will come to trouble Schiller anymore. Of course, the consequence of mingling with this group of criminals is that a superhero comes to the door. On a slightly cold night in Manhattan, Schiller had just made a cup of hot coffee. He closed and locked the door of the clinic, ready to end the day's fishing work, get a good sleep, and continue to harass Stark tomorrow. Just as he put the coffee cup on the table, he heard a crisp sound from the door, then he turned around, and in the dim light, he saw a tall man in a red tights standing outside the door. Schiller turned to pick up the coffee cup and said, "You seem to be a little late, Mr. Daredevil." "Do you know me, Doctor?" Daredevil said. "Of course I know you, Daredevil. You're famous in Hell's Kitchen," Schiller said. "But you seem to be here recently," Daredevil said. "But I'm more familiar with your other identity, Lawyer Matt." Daredevil was obviously shocked. He didn't know how Schiller found out his true identity. And Schiller didn't wait for him to ask, and said, "You have achieved impressive results at Columbia University, and your career path after graduation has gone very smoothly. Not only has you become a good lawyer, but it seems that you have also a law firm of your own. Can you tell me, Matt, why did you become Daredevil? Isn't the pride that a lawyer brings you enough to uphold justice?" "Lawyer, help justice," Daredevil snorted coldly. He said, "Maybe you will think so. Yes, most people think this way. They think that lawyers should speak up and defend the disadvantaged, but in fact, actually, do you think lawyers shouldn't do this? Of course it should. I mean, you don't think you can do it as a lawyer. So you want to do it another way, but what you can't do as a lawyer, can you do it with a ridiculous tight fit and a face mask? Yet," Daredevil said angrily, "my decision has nothing to do with you." "You know what? Your tone just now sounded very much like a rebellious little boy," Schiller said. It was only then that Daredevil realized that since he entered the door, he had fallen into Schiller's language trap, and the rhythm of the conversation had been led by his nose, which not only exposed his true identity but also touched the sensitive point in his heart. He took a deep breath, calmed down, and said, "I have to admit, you're a good psychiatrist, and you're good at using tricks in conversations. But I still have to ask, who are you? Come to Hell's Kitchen with for what purpose? Why are those people crazy? You have so many questions, I can only answer one tonight. Obviously, I've been working all day and I'm tired. You can't interrupt my rest. After all, I'm not a gang member and I'm not breaking the law," Schiller said. "But you're driving those gangsters crazy. You have no evidence. The police only need evidence. Do you think you are more noble than the police? Stop going in circles with me," Daredevil said. "If you listen to me carefully, you will know where I come from and how I know your identity." Daredevil felt a headache. He didn't like to deal with these cunning opponents, which made him have to maintain a high concentration at all times. And because of the shock in his heart just now, he no longer remembers the conversation he had with Schiller when he first arrived, and if he wanted to recall it at this moment, his mind went blank. But if he couldn't answer, it would make him look stupid, so he kept silent. It seems that you have forgotten our conversation a minute ago. I really don't know. To be a superhero, you can't have a good memory. Schiller mocked. Daredevil was secretly annoyed, and he vowed to remember every word Schiller said in the future. 2 years ago, I was teaching at Columbia University. I saw the list of outstanding graduates, and it had your name on it, Matt. And when you were filling out where you wanted to graduate, you said you were going to open a law firm, also in Kansas. Although I am a professor of psychology, I know your former teacher, and he talked to me in his conversation, and you have indeed achieved your dream. Don't change the subject. What I want to know is, how do you know Daredevil is Matt? You may not remember. When you first started down this road, you wore the black and yellow outfit your father wore to fight. I went to an underground boxing match after I came to Hell's Kitchen, and by chance, yes, the boss there seems to have never changed the style of the boxer's clothing in order to save costs. You reading www.uakanshu.com. I understand that Daredevil may have been born here, and he must have something to do with the underground black market boxer. After investigation, the gang members you killed were all related to your father's death. It is not difficult to know your identity, naturally. Why are you investigating me? Are you guilty of being a thief? Matt asked. It's nothing, it's just that if you want to rent a house, you have to know who the landlord here is and what he does. It's best to deal with him. I'm not the landlord here. Daredevil snorted coldly. Oh, yes, so it seems I've got the wrong person. I should go to Kim Bing. But I seem to have a feud with him, and I vaguely remember that one of the gang members who came to visit me mentioned him. The boss is Jin Bing. Jin Bing. Do you have news about Jin Bing? It's a bit. Just when I pay you the rent, I heard one of his men say that their boss is getting impatient with a kid named Daredevil, and he's going to find someone to kill you, the Fly. So you'd better be careful lately. In the end, Daredevil hurried back to his station. It wasn't until after he went back that he realized that none of his goals for tonight had been achieved. He neither found out who Schiller was, nor warned him to be quiet, nor did he find out whether he had anything to do with those gangsters. I don't know what method he used to drive those people crazy. Matt patted his head. He suddenly felt that Schiller's analogy was right. It was as if he had rented the house to an unknown tenant. The tenant also paid the rent first, which made him sure there is no way to take coercive measures for him to move out, but to let him swagger around in Hell's Kitchen. One morning when Gotham City was still full of smog, Schiller stretched and sat up from the bed. He had just settled down in Marvel, and after a few days of leisure, he found another appearance near his psychological clinic. The figure of the agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Those people are like candy canes that can't be thrown away, maybe to ordinary people. Even Stark, the richest man in that world, is still annoyed by them but can't do anything about it. But Schiller is different. After Gotham was annoyed by the young Batman, he could pat his and leave, and go to Marvel to hide for leisure, but now that Marvel is being targeted by agents, he can choose to leave, come hide in Gotham. The agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had absolutely no idea how Schiller disappeared, leaving no trace of him, neither train or plane tickets, and no sign of him at the intersections of various highways, which made Nick Fury Rui was even more determined that Schiller was by no means an ordinary person. And after returning to the 600th world, his colleague, the future Scarecrow Jonathan, did not find that its fear gas was stolen, because Schiller was not greedy, he only took a small test tube amount. After all, he is not like a Scarecrow. He uses fear gas to create terrorist attacks. He is only dealing with a few gangsters who are not in the mainstream. He does not need any high-tech equipment to spray these poisonous gas, just take a small spray bottle. Spraying into the nose of ordinary people, these concentrated fear gas becomes the best weapon. After all, those gang members can't have the same reaction ability as Batman. While studying this poisonous gas, although Schiller had no systematic knowledge of chemistry, he knew how to make the best use of it. In addition to using it as a weapon to spray others, Schiller discovered that the original version of fear gas does not seem to be pure. It can induce fear, but also induce some other negative emotions. This is really good news for a psychiatrist. After all, if the patient is still unwilling to confess his inner emotions, the treatment can no longer proceed. Schiller found that he could spray the poisonous gas of fear that had been diluted hundreds of times as perfume on his body. I don't know why, but maybe it was the credit of the system. This poisonous gas had no effect on him, but it could make people close to him. Of people are infected with a small amount of negative emotions. That's right, Schiller intends to use this trick to deal with the inexperienced Bruce, that is, the young Batman. The current Batman is not the master of the future. Bruce is still too young. He has just traveled the world and learned a skill. Bruce is eager to start his revenge plan. He puts on the original version of the Batsuit and takes the when he got on Bat darts. He wanted to fight criminals. In his eyes, spending hundreds of millions to build equipment is really simple, but he didn't realize that it wasn't these foreign objects that really made him Batman, but the spirit in his heart. Obviously, Batman still has a long way to go, and Schiller, for his own safety and a stable life in Gotham in the future, has to act as the spiritual mentor of young Bruce. It was another ordinary morning. For Bruce, meeting Schiller on a rainy night was just last night. When Schiller called out his real name, Bruce was not surprised. He knew that this person must have something different from him. Ordinary place. Maybe it was supernatural power, maybe it was magic. On the way to travel the world, he had seen many such people. He also knew that this world is far from being as simple as ordinary people imagined, and there are many incredible forces watching over it. Bruce knocked on the door of the psychologist again, and there was a steady but muddled, "Please come in." Somehow, Bruce felt a sense of relief, because the reply came very quickly, and it was obvious that the people inside knew who he was and were happy to let him in. Batman hates all mystery and nihilism, and so does Bruce. In his opinion, Schiller's attitude means that maybe he will tell Bruce what is going on, instead of continuing to shirk and hide, take some words the tricks go in circles with him. Bruce sat opposite Schiller again. Bruce said, "Professor, it seems that you are in a good mood today." "Mr. Wayne, it seems that you are not in a good mood today." Schiller said, "I thought you would come and pour me a cup of coffee like you did on the first day." He spread out his hands, indicating that the table was empty. "You know I didn't make coffee this morning, I'm waiting for you." Bruce was silent for a while, but got up and went to make Schiller a cup of coffee. Schiller actually just thought it was interesting to be able to drink the coffee made by Batman himself, but Bruce thought it was a test, or a mental interference technique, using words to make the other party have to do what he ordered. Well, thinking about it this way, it may indeed be more in line with Schiller's character, a mad doctor obsessed with psychology and psychiatry. Schiller took a sip of hot coffee, which dissipated the chill that was all over his body because Gotham was cold, and Bruce spoke first. "Why did you appear there last night? I don't know what you mean. If you want to hide it, you should make yourself a mask last night, instead of choosing to deny it now after I see your face." Schiller put down the coffee cup and made a crisp sound on the table. He said, "I'm not denying that you saw me last night. I'm asking you, why do you put tens of billions of wealth and don't donate money to do it? Some foundation charity, but to wear a ridiculous tights, when it's raining, go to the streets of Gotham City and compete with some gangsters." Facing this question, Bruce was silent. "This is not a question," Schiller said. "You don't need to think about how to answer, because I will answer you. Because your fundamental purpose is not rescue, but revenge. This is the answer you gave me." Bruce said, "No, I just saw the answer in your heart." Schiller said, "I don't think there is mind reading in this world." Of course there is no mind reading in this world. It's just that some people don't realize that the strong desires in their hearts can be reflected. People always think that they hide their hearts well, but in reality, this is not the case. "Can I learn this ability?" Bruce asked. "This ability to see people's hearts, and then use them to get revenge on criminals?" Schiller asked. "Obviously you're taking it all too easily, Bruce. Maybe your motive is revenge, but if you use it as your motivation, then it will like last night." Schiller, making a falling gesture, Bruce explained. "When I went back last night, I added a cape to my bat armor, and I plan to design a belt. You know those things are not the point. You can put an iron fist with thousands of kilograms on your hand. You can put a motor on your boots that can make you leap to the moon. You can even design yourself a pair of wings to fly to any planet in the solar system. You can do it, Bruce, I believe you can do it. But these are not enough, far from enough. If I had such power, I could wipe out criminals all over the world, wouldn't I?" Bruce asked. Schiller sighed. Obviously, Batman, who has not met the Joker, can't imagine how an unarmed criminal, an ordinary person who only knows a little acrobatics and fighting skills, and is thin and powerless, can defeat a proficient person. Hundreds of fighting skills and superheroes who have learned all kinds of abilities from all over the world. Schiller felt that no matter how he instructed the current Bruce and the future Batman, he could only be regarded as an associate professor in Batman's life. What really taught Batman everything was precisely his nemesis, the Joker. And now, the clown should still be living a very ordinary life in a circus. The current Bruce is still very arrogant. He asked Schiller to study psychology, because he is like this. He has learned various skills all over the world, and his humility, studious and arrogance are actually not in conflict. Schiller said, the same sentence, of course you can study psychology, you can have everything in the textbook, you can come to my class, go back to endorse, write homework, write papers, then final exams. I am a professor, I will not stop any student from studying. You know that's not what I want to learn. Then what do you think? Your kind of special ability. Bruce gestured, and he said, I have seen many such people all over the world, and they have special abilities that ordinary people don't have. No, I'm different from them. I don't have any ability beyond ordinary people. Bruce pondered for a while. He pursed his lips, obviously did not believe it, but Schiller really had nothing to explain to him. The young Batman was obviously too immature, he was too straightforward, impulsive, and unexpected as a result of. And he seemed too impatient. The failure of the superhero career made his impatience even more serious. Obviously, he felt that if he could learn skills similar to mind reading from Schiller, he would be able to deal with criminals more easily, instead of being pushed downstairs by several gang members, and fell to the ground in a daze. He hadn't figured out at all what caused his failure. Bruce came back from Schiller again without success. Schiller just told him, or even threatened him, that he had better study hard, finish all the courses, and get a good grade in the final exam. And Bruce obviously didn't hear a word. In the evening, Schiller went out again. He went to Jonathan's secret base again, and stole a lot of fear gas, and this time, no matter how stupid Jonathan was, he should be able to see that his 2 rows of test tubes were full. Less than half. Schiller is not proficient in any chemical knowledge. He has no way to carry out any improvement and modification of this special gas. He can only put them into different containers, or perform some simple dilution. But there is one more thing he can do, and that is to use these fear gas to scare Batman. Soon Schiller reappeared in the Mawson neighborhood. He knew that Batman would come here again. Bruce was such a person. Wherever he fell, he had to get up there. He never wanted to change places. His pride. The entire Mawson neighborhood is not big, with only 6 alleys. The building where Bruce fell down happened to be the first alley in the Mawson neighborhood, where there was a nightclub, which was controlled by the Gutter Gang. The Gutter Gang is just a little gang in Gotham, because there's a Gotham gutter on the edge of Mawson's block, and the Gutter Gang likes to throw some tragic victims into that gutter, and that water the ditch also became more and more smelly, so other gangsters began to use the ditch to refer to this gang, and the S.H.I.E.L.D gang was complacent and quite proud of it. The first enemy who defeated Batman was obviously not a famous villain. They were just a group of gangsters who smoked upstairs in a nightclub. Batman used fighting skills to solve most of them, but he lacked actual combat experience. A handful of lime was sprinkled in the portrait's eyes, and then he stumbled downstairs. The initial Batman had no assistance, and his equipment was immature. It was not surprising that the boat capsized in the gutter, but the Gutter Gang did not have such good luck for the second time. Schiller leaned against the wall at the end of the Mawson block for a while, and heard frightened cries came from the nightclub, and soon the night was quiet, and a little gangster who no one would care about disappeared into Gotham just like that. Batman walked out. Obviously, his condition was much better than last time. He lowered his head and seemed to be thinking about how to modify his bad equipment. Suddenly, he remembered something, so he walked forward, turned a corner. He wanted to go to the beggar, and then give him some dollars, and told him that the water ditch gang had been solved by him, and he took the money as no longer in danger. Indeed, he found the beggar in the same place again. She was still tightly wrapped in the quilt, shivering in the cold and humid air of Gotham night, and the umbrella that Schiller had given him was gone. Batman handed him the money and said to him in a low voice, "There are no gangs in this block anymore, you are safe." The beggar raised his head tremblingly, but Batman didn't see a trace of gratitude in his eyes. He could not believe that. The beggar stared into his eyes with only hatred. "Aren't you happy?" Batman asked. "Of course he doesn't." A familiar voice came from above Batman's head, and Schiller stood on the balcony above the beggar's floor, looking down at Batman from the second floor. "Because of the existence of the S.H.I.E.L.D gang, there will be a steady stream of guests in that nightclub every day. Some guests will take food in their hands. When they have only a little left to eat, they will throw it away on the side of the road, so beggars can pick them up and continue eating. But now without the gutter gang, the nightclub can't go on. If there are no guests, it means there is no food. But a few $100s is enough for him. Yeah, you have the best medical system in Gotham, you have a personal doctor, and you have a family health counselor. You haven't tried a few colds and fevers, and you don't even know that being frozen to the point where you can't stand up will be a disaster. What kind of feeling? In your imagination, he can go to the nearest supermarket with a few $100s, buy enough daily necessities, maybe find a hotel for a few nights, and then cure his disease." Schiller dragged a long tone, then. But unfortunately, he couldn't even make the first step. Batman crouched down. He tore off the quilt beside the beggar's feet, and found that her entire lower limbs had been frozen blue and purple. It had been raining for several days in Gotham City, and her legs were soaked in the water and were already swollen. Batman is well versed in the theory of surgery. He knows that even in the best hospital in Gotham, such a lower limb can only be amputated. He was completely silent, looking at the many dollar bills that the beggar did not hold in his hands, but let them fall on the ground at will. He felt an incredible absurdity, a shame that suffocated him. He suddenly felt that many negative emotions were irresistibly engulfing his heart, making him want to roar. Batman felt that he had never been so gaffed tonight. He stood up, staggered backwards and walked backwards. After a few steps, he fell to the ground. Obviously, a tragic story with an unexpected ending, and the negativity induced by a little bit of fear gas was enough to silence Bruce for a few days. Gordon unbuttoned a button on the collar of his shirt. He twisted his neck, relaxed his shoulders, then turned his head to look out the window at Gotham's dark rainy night, which was still cold and damp. His colleagues greeted each other and left the station after get-off work, and one of them said to Gordon, "Hey man, you shouldn't have taken that tough case in the first place, dozens of missing people. It's midnight to check the files." Gordon smiled helplessly, and said, "You said, there have been dozens of disappearances, and I have to get snacks." After all his colleagues left, Gordon made himself a cup of espresso, and he planned to fight all night tonight. The disappearance cases in Mosenji district are very strange. In the past, even if the disappearances were done very covertly, the bodies of some dead victims would still be found. However, among the 46 people missing in Mosenji district, not a single person was found. It's not normal for S body to appear on the streets of Gotham. Gotham has never been a city of laws. There are so many gangsters here, no seasoned gang member would thankfully dispose of a body. They would just throw it downstairs, even though they knew it was a lie. But the police are nothing in Gotham. Among the dozens of people who disappeared in the Mawson neighborhood, there are people of all occupations. They hardly have any common rules. The only thing they have in common is the resident population of the Mawson neighborhood. At this time, Gordon was still very young. He was only a small head of the police station. He was still far away from the chief. This case, which no one wanted to take over, was a hot potato. Denji took it over, and even though he knew that this was most likely a thankless job, he still planned to do his best to plead for the victims. Just when he stayed up late to sort out the files, and was already sleepy enough, he suddenly felt a noise behind him. When he turned around, a huge shadow enveloped him. Gordon immediately touched his waist, but his pistol was not there. The man on the opposite side was wearing a black tights, with two pointed ears on his head, and a black cape. "Who are you? Why are you in the police station?" "You can think of me as a vigilante. I'm investigating the disappearance of people in the Mawson neighborhood. I found out that you went there today and yesterday. You should be the police detective in charge of this case. I hope to be able to get information about these disappearances." Population profile. Just as Gordon was about to reject the person opposite, he said again, "Of course, I also have some clues here that I can exchange with you, or I can very well solve this case with you." Vigilante, Gordon thought. this is ridiculous, there is no such person in Gotham City, otherwise it would not be called Sin City. The first encounter between Gordon and Batman was not pleasant. The two of them faced off in the police station for a long time. Obviously, the new Batman had not yet grasped the essence of leaving without finishing the conversation. He and Gordon dawdled for a long time, and finally got impatient. Batman finds himself really unlucky. There are countless derelict police officers in Gotham City, but he happens to meet the most serious one. Gordon even wants to swear to protect those files. Batman doesn't want to hurt him, so there is no better way. After Batman cleaned up the gutter gang, he was shocked by the beggar. Although he saved the beggar in the end, he obviously reflected on what he had done, and he was not so good at the beginning. Start with the simplest. This is the starting point of his superhero road. Except for the S.H.I.E.L.D gang, it is not peaceful here. The number of missing persons in the Mosen neighborhood has reached a very dangerous number, and the resident population here is only a few hundred. That's it, but more than 40 people are missing, and Batman is determined to use this case as the starting point for his debut. And, of course, he has something to suspect. A college teacher, who didn't sleep in the middle of the night, sneaked into the block where the Gotham gang was located, appeared and disappeared for no reason. Is there anyone more suspicious than this? It's not that Batman didn't think about it. He went to S.H.I.E.L.D to confront him, but he knew that it might be difficult for him to beat the professor in terms of words. After obtaining sufficient evidence, he will be brought to justice. On this day, Batman was in the Mosen neighborhood again. He couldn't get the missing person file from Gordon, so he infiltrated a missing person's home and wanted to find some other clues from his house. As soon as he turned out the window, he saw S.H.I.E.L.D's figure again. Under the street lamp not far downstairs, S.H.I.E.L.D was holding a black umbrella and looking at the opposite wall. Batman saw him. He found that S.H.I.E.L.D was looking at the place where the beggar used to be, but there were no beggars there anymore. Batman sent the beggar to the best hospital in Gotham City and contracted all his treatment expenses. Both legs were amputated, but at least he survived. Since the beggar has been leaning against the wall all the year round, there has been a dark stain there, and the rain has formed a small puddle where he used to sit, reflecting the dim light of the street lamp, while S.H.I.E.L.D is standing on the road on the opposite side, looking at the puddle. I don't know what I'm thinking. In the end, the young Batman didn't hold his breath. He jumped down and appeared in front of S.H.I.E.L.D. Good evening, Batman. I remember you called yourself that last time, so I'll call you that too. Batman's eyes under the mask stared at him tightly, and he said, "Don't go around in circles with me, you know what I'm here for. You are here to be the savior, I know. For example, you saved a poor beggar. Did you do the disappearance case in the Mosen neighborhood?" Batman asked. S.H.I.E.L.D shook his head, and Batman said, "You're the only outsider, and you don't have any motive for being here." S.H.I.E.L.D said, "Obviously, you already have the answer in your heart, so why are you asking me? You are always very good at turning what you have determined into questions and asking others. If you get an answer that you are satisfied with, you will naturally be satisfied, but if you don't get the answer you want, you will become very angry. If I say I'm not the murderer, you'll feel very angry, but your anger doesn't come from your sense of justice, it's just that I didn't give you the answer you want. You think you can predict things like God, don't you?" S.H.I.E.L.D asked. I said, "Don't go in circles with me, you are the only suspect here." Before S.H.I.E.L.D could speak, he found a bat dart flying along the side of his neck. He seemed to underestimate the enemy. Whether it was Batman at this time or Batman in the future, although they didn't kill people, they did. They often beat up the criminals and didn't shy away from breaking their legs before sending them to the hospital. But obviously, this young Batman is missing a program. S.H.I.E.L.D didn't speak for a while, and another bat dart rubbed his neck and flew over. This time, S.H.I.E.L.D didn't tilt his head in advance using spider sense, but looked at Batman quietly. The bat dart left a hole on the side of his neck, and blood flowed out. At this time, there was a series of rapid footsteps at the end of the alley, and a voice shouted, "Stop." Batman turned to look at the end of the alley. Under the street light, Gordon was aiming at the two with a pistol. "Hello, Detective Gordon," S.H.I.E.L.D said. Detective Gordon held his gun and walked over slowly. He said, "Put down your weapons and don't move." S.H.I.E.L.D spread his hands, indicating that he had no weapons, and Batman put away the bat dart in his hand. Gordon approached. only to find that Schiller's neck was bleeding, the blood flowing down his shoulders, and even wet his shirt. Schiller said, "Batman, you made a mistake. You said I was the only suspect, but the detective obviously didn't think so. The people who have no motive to appear here, except me, and you. I'm here to investigate missing persons," Batman said. "Then so am I," Schiller said. "But obviously, you're no more noble than me, because we're not cops, and I think only Detective Gordon has the authority to do that right now." "I'll find evidence," Batman said. "If you also need evidence, what's the difference between you and the police?" Schiller asked suddenly. Batman had nothing to say for a while. He thought Schiller would ask him for evidence, and Batman knew that even though Schiller appeared where he shouldn't, it didn't work. As evidence to prove that he did commit a crime, he made up his mind to find clues to prove that Schiller was the murderer. But Schiller's question got to the point. Batman thought. He always thought the police were very useless, because they had to tell evidence in everything. Even if the murder happened in front of them, they would not go without seeing the murderer arrest the most suspected person. It was like this when his parents died. No police officer gave a proper explanation, and no one was brought to justice. His parents died, but no one paid the price. He thought, if he also needs evidence, then why doesn't he go to the Gotham Police Department and become a cop? But if he does not need evidence and arbitrarily arrests anyone, then what is the difference between him and a criminal? Batman regretted it, so he shouldn't have come forward to talk to Schiller. Every time he had a conversation with Schiller, he would be shaken quite a bit. This kind of psychological and conscious shake is the most terrifying. Every time after meeting Schiller, Batman has to go back and think deeply for at least 2 or 3 days, to understand the question he asked, to find his own answer, and to strengthen his confidence, and then he can come out and play again. He feels that it is no different from taking a class in a university. The teacher asks a question, the students think for themselves, and then write a paper. The next time they meet, in addition to checking the homework, there are new questions waiting for him, one question after another, as if never endless. And Schiller also complained in his heart that this Jonathan is really capable. After Schiller stole most of the fear gas, not only did it not slow down his research speed, but it made him even more crazy to kidnap the experimental items, which made Schiller in the middle of the night. Can't sleep, have to clean up this mess. Compared with Schiller, Jonathan looks more like a good man. He is thin, with slender limbs, a mess of curly hair, and a pair of large black-rimmed glasses. He always has dark circles under his eyes. Weak, like a downright otaku. His character in school is also very like a good man. All Gotham students know that Jonathan's class is not strict, and the exam is easy to pass. Even if there are some absenteeism and lateness, he will only lift glasses, let those classmates sit down without criticizing them. He looked 10% like a nerd, while Schiller, the new psychology professor, looked like a senior member of Arkham Asylum. Schiller looks a bit like a mixed race, with black hair and gray eyes, and the original owner also looks like a straight man. All clothes are gray except black. And most of them are coats, scarves and formal clothes worn at work. Schiller has never gone out to buy clothes, so he has always maintained the original owner's dressing style, and Gotham is always raining these days. Schiller is almost always carry a black umbrella. How to say this image, it seems that he is a bit sorry for the audience if he is not the final villain of the TV series. And Schiller had only been here for a few days, and his students discovered that this is actually a very strict professor. His teaching level is indeed very high, but he is ruthless to those students who arrive late and leave early. Moreover, there is a test every few classes, and he directly said in the class that at least 30% of the students in this class should fail, which made everyone nervous. Although the students of Gotham University are from good families, they are not without rebelliousness. No college student will like such a professor. At the beginning, there were several thorns in Schiller's class, but soon, no knowing which mouth was broken, Schiller's resume spread, and the students in Schiller's class immediately became quiet like docile sheep. After all, no matter how you look at it, it is impossible for a normal person to be involved in so many serial murders. Soon, Schiller became a campus legend in Gotham University. Some people say that their professor is actually the murderer of these serial murders, and some people say that he actually has some kind of unfortunate curse on him. Wherever he goes, there will be terrible cases, and there are people with rich imaginations. giving S.H.I.E.L.D a tragic background and suggesting that his involvement in the investigation of so many homicides was in fact out of revenge. Various versions of the story always have one that matches the students' inner expectations. Among the students, this bizarre and somewhat terrifying story always spreads very fast. Within a few days, most of the students knew about it. S.H.I.E.L.D's past. S.H.I.E.L.D went out to buy breakfast. The window he was standing at was never crowded. The students all looked at him from a distance. In class, his homework was incomparable. No professor could ever do that. At this point, since the confrontation that night, S.H.I.E.L.D could often feel Bruce following him, even during the day, on campus. Fortunately, he has spider sense. Bruce tried several times in his dormitory, counseling room, and classroom podium. Mounting the camera did not work. But that provided S.H.I.E.L.D with inspiration. It seems that the young Batman still didn't think about it, but he found that Bruce and Gordon seemed to have reached some agreement. S.H.I.E.L.D went to the Mawson block a few times at night, and he found that the two of them seemed to be really joining forces. Finally one day, when it was close to bedtime, the sky in Gotham was as dark as ink. S.H.I.E.L.D didn't plan to go out at all tonight. He wanted a good night's sleep. University teaching was not as easy as he thought. Psychological diagnosis and treatment are occasionally visited by students who really need psychological counseling, whether it is to relieve anxiety, relieve depression, or really need to provide psychological advice. These tasks are also very tiring, so he intends to sleep well. But it didn't work out. Jonathan, who was only active in the second half of the night, suddenly left the campus in the first half of the night. S.H.I.E.L.D knew that he might want to catch a new batch of experimental products. Indeed, recently Gordon and Bruce are always in the Mawson neighborhood. Jonathan is very clear that he can't beat the police. Once caught, he will definitely be locked up. His physical fitness is not as good as S.H.I.E.L.D's, and even the fear gas may be sprayed crookedly. Batman has gradually gained some fame after sweeping away the Ditch Gang and several other small gangsters in the Mawson neighborhood. Everyone knows this place. There's an eccentric vigilante battling the gangsters, and Jonathan has been afraid to show up for several nights. But his fear poison gas is about to make a breakthrough, and no experimental madman can accept it. At this critical juncture, the experiment failed, his experimental products have long been used up, and he must go to capture new ones. Although he is not physically strong, it is still very simple for him to capture the experimental subject. He only needs to find a house with an open window, put a pipe in it, and spray a large amount of anesthetic into it, and then pry open the door of their house and drag the person out. S.H.I.E.L.D watched him leave the campus, and he had to put on his coat again, take an umbrella, and follow behind him. Although he didn't have a Madonna mentality and didn't intend to be a superhero savior, it happened in front of him. The tragedy, he will still take care of it. More importantly, if Jonathan continues to mess around like this, there will not be a few people left in the Mawson neighborhood, and then Batman's debut journey will die before he makes his debut. Anyway, the Scarecrow will be caught by Batman sooner or later. It's better to choose a day than to hit the sun, just today. And S.H.I.E.L.D used a small trick. He intends to teach Batman a lesson, let him quickly wake up from that arrogant state of mind. The current Batman still has room for mistakes, because the Joker is just a circus actor. S.H.I.E.L.D can't imagine how badly Batman would be played by him if the Joker appeared in front of the young Batman now. Although Batman is still young, he still has many shortcomings, but he has to admit that he has traveled all over the world, and the skills he has learned are not for nothing. And Jonathan is not a meticulous criminal now. He has no special training, and he has no anti-investigation awareness. Many of his clues have been discovered by Batman and Gordon. Together, the two of them touched the underground of the chapel. There, they found Jonathan's laboratory. It was not a very clever laboratory, and it could even be said to be very similar to a black-hearted workshop. Dark, cramped, and smelly, Batman looked at the drain in the basement and said, I'm afraid I know where those people went." Gordon came over with a pistol and said, "Although I don't really want to ask, the truth must be written on my combat report. Aqua Regia. Not only can it melt metals, but it can also melt the most difficult part of the human body." "Okay, I know, you don't need to say it, I don't want to hear the details," Gordon said. They investigated in this small laboratory, and suddenly, Gordon found a little trace under an old crate, which was some broken fallen leaves. Red pine, said Batman. I saw its cotyledons. Where are there any pine trees in Gotham? Otherwise, the weather here wouldn't be like this, Gordon said. I want to have this plant somewhere, Batman said. Gotham University, which is the greenest place in Gotham City, where the widest pedestrian walkway is flanked by this plant on both sides. Gordon crouched down, looked at the traces carefully, and said, it should be that the murderer's boots stepped on this kind of fallen leaves, and there is still mud on it. Obviously, the heavy rain these days has caused him a lot of trouble. After he came here, the stains fell off inadvertently. Didn't even clean up. Gordon looked up and said, is the murderer a student of Gotham University? Maybe it could be a teacher, Batman said. Is that the person you threatened that day? Gordon asked. I'm not threatening him, Batman said. But you cut his neck with a dart and caused him to bleed a lot. For a wound as long as that, I'm afraid it will definitely leave a scar, Gordon said. Are you sympathizing with a criminal? Batman asked. He's not a criminal, at least not until he's tried. Judgment. Batman snorted coldly. Gordon noticed Batman's distrust of the judicial system. He did not refute him righteously. He has been a police officer in Gotham for a day or two. The judicial system here is indeed untrustworthy, or that the entire system of order is untrustworthy. But in my opinion, you are holding a dangerous weapon and wantonly hurting an unarmed ordinary person, which is a threat. Gordon said. Unarmed, Batman said. He suddenly found that he could not refute Gordon, because according to his knowledge, S.H.I.E.L.D did not seem to have received any professional fighting training, and Batman was sure that he could knock him down with one punch. But he has been troubled by this person for many days, but there is nothing he can do. He suddenly remembered a sentence he had heard on the way to study, words are stronger than fists. But that's about it, Batman thought. The murderer is someone from Gotham University. There is almost no second answer. Isn't this evidence enough? Maybe it's time to send that crazy professor to jail. He looked at the stained drainage pipes on the soles of his feet, where the souls of more than 40 people had disappeared, and some of them must also have parents. On that night long ago, his parents' lives disappeared in the alley, but no one paid the price they should. But now it's different. With him around, these criminals will eventually go to where they should go, and none of them can escape. Chapter 11. After Gordon and Batman left the chapel underground, they both seemed a little silent. After all, in the place where they were just now, in just 1 month, dozens of lives were buried. Gotham is a dark city, but when this kind of darkness is naked in front of people, only people with strong willpower can digest the impact of this deep darkness. There are countless emotions surging in the hearts of Batman and Gordon. The first case of a new Batman, this seemingly endless evil, lightless darkness before him, he suddenly realizes that, as S.H.I.E.L.D said, he may not be fully prepared. Strong force is only a means to survive here, but to save this city, force alone is not enough. Just thinking about it, Batman turned a corner and saw S.H.I.E.L.D standing on the second floor again, holding an umbrella. Below the balcony is where the beggar once stayed. Batman felt a sense of absurdity again. This criminal who killed dozens of innocent lives, how dare he stand here? Why in this world are some people who can be indifferent to the fresh life? Even cruel enough to kill them without hesitation. Batman's inner depression turned into anger. Under Gordon's gaze, he jumped up along the street and directly onto the balcony more than 2 meters high. Your trial is coming, murderer, Batman said. Have you found the evidence you were looking for? S.H.I.E.L.D asked. Of course, and this evidence is enough to judge you. S.H.I.E.L.D suddenly laughed, and he said in a very light tone, how ridiculous, you are still thinking about trying me. The police department in Gotham City should give you a good citizen medal, you were really great police. If only when your parents died, there were such great police officers who found the evidence left by the murderers and tried them, how good would it be? You think so, right? You don't trust the police or the court, but you still look for evidence and try to use the correctness of the judiciary to try me. Don't you think what you've done is very contradictory? You have to prove that I broke the law, Batman, and your actions have also broken the law. If I will be tried, so will you. You are using criminal behavior to prove that a criminal is a criminal, aren't you? S.H.I.E.L.D raised his voice and said in a cadence, you think you have the ability to avenge the criminals by your own means. But in the end, you are still ordinary people who have been domesticated by this orderly society. You are still giving evidence and making demands. Judgment. If you can't let go of these, the shackles that these orderly societies put on you, and the concepts of the law and the judicial process in your mind, you'll never be able to get the justice you want. Quote. Bruce. Schiller looked into his eyes and said, "The law is not justice, you are. Gotham's law didn't save your parents, just like it didn't save the dozens of missing people. If you have any senseless fantasies about it, you'll never be the real Batman." Schiller could clearly see that Batman's arms were trembling, his hand holding the bat dart was covered with blue veins, and even his entire body was shaking. Obviously, he became extremely angry. Schiller's words were too harsh. He exposes one of the biggest inconsistencies of the young Batman. Gotham's laws failed to save his parents, but Batman, who kept saying that he wanted revenge, was still kidnapped by the order of things. In the end, he still followed justice. "You want me to do my justice?" Batman asked. Then he raised a gun and pointed it at Schiller's forehead. Of course Batman has a gun. In Gotham City, you can hardly survive without this hot weapon. Not to mention any justice. Schiller still looked calm. He said, "You haven't answered my previous question. Did you find the evidence you were looking for?" "What was that?" "There are stains left by you on the side of the crate under the chapel. There are dirt and leaves, the leaves of the Korean pine that are only found in Gotham University." Schiller said, "What does that represent?" "It means you are the murderer," Batman said. "Really? I appeared on the streets of Mawson Street by myself for no reason, dressed and acted suspiciously. And you found a leaf belonging to Gotham University at the crime scene, indicating that the murderer may be Gotham University. So I am the murderer." "What a rigorous reasoning," Schiller said. Batman looked at his unrepentant and guiltless expression, his understated tone, his anger had really reached its peak, and just as he was about to pull the trigger, Gordon ran over and shouted, "Stop it. Put the gun down." Batman was interrupted for a moment, and Schiller threw a USB stick on the ground between them and said, "The evidence is conclusive. The murderer has been to Gotham University, and I am a university teacher. It is very conclusive. Yeah, how much do you wish that when your parents died, someone would just shoot the murderer neatly like you are now, because the evidence is solid." "Don't mention my parents," Batman said in a trembling voice, "you criminal. You think of a lot of similarities," Schiller said. "But your anger ignores more differences. For example, I have never had any educational background related to chemistry and biology. For example, I have participated in the investigation of countless serial murders. The anti-investigation awareness is not so bad that I can't even clean up footprints. More importantly," Schiller looked at the USB flash drive and said, "My evidence is more conclusive than yours." Batman's anger dropped a little because of Gordon's interruption, and after regaining his senses, he felt that even in this wet and cold weather, sweat soaked the shirt on his back. Batman cautiously picked up the USB drive, he inserted the USB drive into the microcomputer in his arm, and a projection popped up. At this time, Gordon also took a detour and ran into the balcony. He saw in the video, a man in a plaid shirt sneakily stood on the outdoor unit of a household's air conditioner, stuck a hose into the window, and the houseless standing and sitting figures in the room fell down one after another, and after the man jumped off the air conditioner, he walked into the corridor. After a while, he dragged 2 large boxes, put them on the trailer, and pushed them away, and the people in the house have disappeared. This is Batman's inspiration for Schiller. Jonathan really lacks anti-investigation awareness. Schiller was standing in the corridor of the building opposite him, shooting with a camera, but he didn't even notice it. But also, no one in Gotham City will come out to hang out in the middle of the night, especially if they come to such a slum, they will lose their lives if they are not careful. Gordon suddenly shouted, "No wonder. I remember that when registering the addresses of the missing persons, it was indeed the lower floor residents who suffered more, and almost all of the victims' houses had balconies," Gordon said. Then he looked at Batman and Schiller, and he said angrily to Batman, "I really misread you, did you just want to shoot? Do you know that you almost killed someone?" Batman silently looked at the projection on his arm. Anyone who was not blind could see that the murderer inside was 108,000 miles away from Schiller. Although Schiller doesn't know how to fight and doesn't exercise, he is still tall, only a little shorter than Batman, and a little thinner, but it's still close to 1.9 meters, and the man in the video is only 1.9 meters tall. S.H.I.E.L.D, weighing no more than 60 kilograms. Professor Jonathan is a good old man, that's what you think, right? Because he doesn't check homework, treats you well, and will never fail your class. But I'm different, I'm a very troublesome professor, always in picking faults in homework, taking exams when they have nothing to do, and threatening all students with the possibility of failing their courses. So of course I'm the murderer, and he's not. After all, how can such a cowardly, taciturn, thin and small person be a serial murderer? Stop talking, Batman said in a trembling voice. He recalled the scene when he faced the beggar that day. Out of the corner of his eyes, he could still see the stains left by the beggar leaning against the wall. The strong sense of guilt and shame surrounded him again. And Gordon added fuel to the fire when he said, I don't care where you're a weirdo, wearing a straitjacket to cause trouble in the city, but you almost killed a good guy. What do you two have? If you have a personal feud, you can solve it yourself, and don't interfere with the police handling the case. Aren't the police in Gotham City busy enough? You want to kill someone in front of me because you want me to put you in jail immediately. Gordon said. Several days of overtime had already made him feel irritable, and he said impatiently, the weirdo in tights, give me that USB, I'll take it back for the record. This gentleman, please come back with me, you seems to know who the murderer is, we need clues. After a while of silence, Batman silently stretched out his arm and handed the USB flash drive to Gordon. He found that his smug debut trip was completely adding to the chaos. He thought the criminal Schiller was the one who helped a lot and provided the most crucial evidence. Schiller didn't speak anymore. Batman also stood there, and the street outside began to rain endlessly again. Just as he was about to follow Gordon away, he heard Batman behind him say, Sorry, Professor. Schiller's footsteps stopped. He felt a little incredible. What did Batman just say? He just apologized. Schiller turned his head in disbelief. Batman stood in the shadow cast by the building, the only light shining on his mask. He pursed his lips tightly. Schiller felt very absurd. He is Batman. Because he is Batman. And Batman is always right. Batman won't apologize to anyone. In the face of everyone's doubts, he would only say, because I am Batman. In the Batman comics, Schiller has seen too much about the dark side of Batman, such as preparing kryptonite to guard against Superman, such as preparing a plan for everyone in the Justice League to deal with them. He seems to distrust any man, doesn't even trust himself. It has to be said that when the editor of the comics created this character, these dark sides made him more attractive. It can also leave a deeper impression on readers. But this also caused Schiller to have a prejudice against Batman. He thinks Batman should be like that. In the comics, Batman never apologizes because he doesn't think he's at fault. He thinks the precautions against his companions are necessary. This has created a prejudice for Schiller. It's not that Batman will not apologize. When he really finds out that he is wrong, he will still feel regret and guilt. Schiller really wanted to teach the young Batman some principles, such as not to be prejudiced, not to judge people by appearance, not to be carried away by anger, and to keep independent thinking. But Schiller suddenly found that he was not qualified to teach Batman not to be prejudiced, because he himself had an indelible stereotype about the character, and he hoped that Bruce could become the Bat in the comics in his mind. Man, and the faster the process, the better. But now it seems that this story is not a wise and learned professor and his young and reckless students, but a very classic, Pride and Prejudice. With the absolute arrogance of his own reasoning, Batman thought that Schiller must be the murderer. When he had preconceived prejudice and some evidence that just matched the prejudice, he almost shot Schiller. But Schiller also has a prejudice against Batman, believing that he should be the old-fashioned, cautious and suspicious dark hero in the comics. The two of them didn't say that they laughed at 100 paces, but they could also say that they were half a catty and 82. Now Batman seems to have learned this lesson, and he clearly realizes that he is not omnipotent. His reasoning will also be bound by prejudice and thus produce great fallacies, and his impulses are even more deadly under this arrogance. He saw the scar on the side of Schiller's neck, which he had left with a bat dart earlier. At that time, he assumed Schiller was a criminal and threatened him in the same way as a criminal, although he did not shoot today, but like Gordon said, the wound was deep, and I'm afraid there must be a scar. Batman felt guilty about this and was very scared. He thought that the fact that the law cannot properly judge every criminal is not the reason for him to arbitrarily judge others with his own arrogance. And in the case that he cannot guarantee that he is 100% correct, any impulsive violence may leave an indelible scar on an innocent person, even a good person. He was just rejoicing. Fortunately, the price that innocent people paid was not life. Standing in the shadows, Batman thought that he wanted to prevent this possibility forever, so he decided that he would never kill no matter how vicious criminals he faced in the future. If any innocent person is wrongfully killed in his hands, then he will become a more heinous criminal than killing his parents. Because the criminals who killed his parents, maybe just for money or revenge, the damage they caused was 2 lives. And if Batman kills innocent people indiscriminately, then the city will have no hope. In the comics, the setting that Batman does not kill seems to have existed from the beginning. Schiller did not investigate why this was, and he felt that the setting was wrong and very irritating. For example, in the face of those nasty criminals, those lunatics who have escaped from prison again and again, why can't Batman kill them? He had thought about it countless times when he was reading comics. But what he didn't expect was that in this world, it was because of him, and because of Schiller, that the young Batman firmly believed that he would not kill criminals. Because he's Batman, he's the city's only hope, and if he's overwhelmed by the guilt of killing innocent people, the city will be completely helpless. By coincidence, although Schiller failed to let the young Batman establish his own spiritual support, he successfully completed a setting of Batman, that is, not to kill. Schiller would never have imagined that he would regret his meddling this time countless times in the days to come. When Batman fully matured, Schiller roared in his heart countless times, why can't Batman move his fingers to strangle those criminals, so that they don't appear in front of him again and again break his peaceful life? And all of this stemmed from today's events, and it was all his own fault. In Hell's Kitchen, the window suddenly opened, and a cold wind rushed in. A silver-white mecha rushed in quickly, circled the room quickly, and then fell to the ground. With a sound of hum, Mark II's mask dropped. Stark stood in front of the table and looked around the room, and said with a little disgust, "Your place is really broken." Schiller rolled his eyes as he looked at the hot coffee that had been cooled by the cold wind in an instant. In terms of character setting, Stark changed his mind after being kidnapped, from a nasty to a superhero. But now, as far as Schiller's feeling is concerned, he has clearly changed from a very annoying to an ordinary annoying playboy. Unlike Bruce, who is also disguised as a playboy, Bruce may be leatherette, but Stark is definitely real leather. But through the contact with Stark, Schiller has figured out 3 topics that can make him explode in place, that is, money, male prowess, and he is not as good as his father. Schiller took a sip of coffee and said slowly, "I know my consultation fee is very expensive, but it doesn't matter. You can complain for a while. As long as I don't get to the point, I won't be charged. Besides, do you know that the disgusting expression you just wiped off the dust on my table with your hands is even more motherly than the cherries on the cream cake? I admit that the environment here is really bad. After all, I'm not like you, I'm a billionaire, but then again, Mr. Howard should have started from scratch in such a dilapidated house. I'm afraid this is indeed a hardship that you can't understand, so you Miss Pepper was worried for so long after being kidnapped." After Schiller stacked 3 buffs, Stark really exploded in place. The silver-white Mark II exploded with a bang. Obviously, Stark didn't know what he was hammering in it just now. Oh, Schiller thinks, there are 2 points that will make Stark explode, that is, questioning Stark's ingenuity, and saying that Stark's industrial products are rubbish. Poor Mark II, and poor Jarvis, with all due respect, the quality of Stark's industrial products is like this. Of course, there is one last point, which is to express sympathy for him. Quote, "But it doesn't matter, it's much better than those robot rice cookers on the market. It's already a qualitative leap." Stark rushed out directly from the window he rushed in. Obviously, if he stayed here, Mark II might really blow up in Hell's Kitchen. Schiller sighed refreshed, and the depression brought about by Gotham and Batman was swept away. But soon, Stark still flew back. He said angrily, "I call you and you don't answer, I can only fly to this junk. You broke my Jarvis last time. Today, when I wanted to upgrade him, I found that he was completely broken and crashed. You have to be responsible for curing him." Just as Schiller was about to say something, Stark interrupted him and said, "Don't think I'll pay you a penny for the diagnosis, it's obviously you who broke him, and this has delayed the development of my new mecha, you have to cure him or I'll let Pepper fire you." Schiller thought for a while. Indeed, the Mark V hasn't come out yet. Maybe Jarvis really can't work. Although Stark doesn't point to Jarvis' research and development, he has to point to Jarvis to take care of him. He couldn't take care of himself, especially in the lab. S.H.I.E.L.D knew that Stark was still angry. He was in a good mood now, and it wasn't that he couldn't send a free medical treatment. So S.H.I.E.L.D crossed his hips and said, "Okay, this time it's free, let's go." As soon as Stark snapped his fingers, another mecha flew in. S.H.I.E.L.D and him stared at the mecha and said, "Don't you want me to sit here? Otherwise, how are you going to get there?" A few minutes later, Stark and S.H.I.E.L.D appeared under the dilapidated bus stop in Hell's Kitchen, and Stark said, "I can't believe my first show of my age-old suit was in a smoky, worn-out car. On the bus." With that said, the old bus with black smoke arrived. S.H.I.E.L.D greeted the driver. Stark struggled to get Mark II to climb up with his legs. S.H.I.E.L.D said, "Actually, you can also put the whole car lifted up and fly over." "Then why can't you just fly over with your suit on? Does that make any difference?" Stark asked. S.H.I.E.L.D said, "Because the picture of Iron Man flying with the bus must be beautiful." After arriving at Stark's lab, Stark stood in front of a pile of panels and said, "I don't know how you did it. Jarvis is dead, or not dead, his hardware is all intact." "Yes, but he doesn't want to work anymore. I'm going to give him a big upgrade, but I don't want this to happen again. After all, if someone asks him a few questions, he will freeze and he will not be able to participate in combat missions at all, which is not what I want." When it comes to his major, Stark is quite straightforward. He said, "I want Jarvis to become a real electronic life. He can become an almighty steward, even the best steward in the world. But he seems to be trapped by the problem of your emotional logic. I clearly set a way of thinking for him. It's actually a paradox, like the questions I asked him," S.H.I.E.L.D said. "Machine life always follows favorable logic when making choices, but when favorable logic conflicts with the master's command, what you give him the setting is to follow the master's orders, but you give him sensibility, and after sensibility and reason conflict, machines can't deceive themselves like people can." He couldn't find a reason to convince himself like a man. He couldn't admit that this was the best result. He couldn't escape and forget, so of course he would get stuck. Stark waved his hand and said, "Can I hide similar contradictory logic? For example, list certain words as prohibited words, or block certain emotional issues." You want him to be a real electronic life. Of course, like us, the one with a soul. Well, to put it simply, if you want Jarvis to have real feelings, then he can't get around these issues, but if he can't figure out these issues, then he can't count as a real life. But the problem is that he is troubled by these problems, and he can't work, but I need him very much. Do I have to wait for him to digest it like a woman with a breakdown? Did you let Miss Pepper digest it by herself when she was emotionally broken down?" Looking at S.H.I.E.L.D's dog shit eyes, Stark said, "I don't, of course I will comfort her, what are you thinking?" S.H.I.E.L.D said, "The decision is yours, didn't you find out? Tony, can I call you that? All the contradictions in his thinking come from you, because you created him and set him the criteria that he must serve you, and his underlying agreement requires him to obey your orders. This in itself is not the way humans should think. I asked you the same question, how would you answer? If your father is about to die, and one of your decisions can save him, but he is strongly against it, what do you do? If you obeyed his wishes and didn't save him, and he died, would you regret it? If he died, do you think he would regret giving birth to you before he died? If he died, do you think he would hate you? If he resents you, will you blame yourself? If you were given another chance to start over, would you make a different choice? If you disobeyed his wishes and chose to save him, and he blamed you afterwards, would you feel resentful? If you defied his wishes and saved him, but he felt that you defied him and regretted giving birth to you, would you resent him?" Stark was silent. For the first time, he did not react violently to the mention of his father. "He wouldn't do that," Stark said. His voice was low but firm. He said, "He will not stop me from saving him. If I make a big mistake because of saving him, he will choose to come back to life and try his best to make it up, even if he gives his life again." "Does Jarvis understand you like this?" S.H.I.E.L.D stood up, patted Stark on the shoulder and said, "Does he know that you are actually very similar to your father? Does he know what he knows about you to be able to answer all these questions?" You can't expect an electronic life that uses algorithms and logic to actively understand your past, your personality. What you haven't instilled in him will be blank for him. If you want him to have real life, the first thing to do is to be like what your father gave you. Including your past, your personality, your way of thinking, you have to give him a part of your life first. It's like the birth of a child. Stark was silent for a long time. He rarely frowned, showing a somewhat embarrassed look. He said, I firmly believe that there is no mind reading in this world, and Jarvis can't do it, so why would he come? Know me. It's an almost impossible technology. You don't know artificial intelligence. I don't understand artificial intelligence, but you don't understand human. You reading www.uakonchu.com. Stark was speechless again by what he said, but Schiller said, humanity exists because of wisdom and greatness because of emotion. We are the only ones on Earth that have maintained prosperity for so many years, and we are still the best among so many creatures that God has created. And you are challenging God. He did not create anything that can match human-like creatures, but maybe you can. No. This is a brand new field, Tony. Your father has never been here. What you are conquering is a field that has never made decent progress in human history, creating people outsiders. The momentum of Stark's departure made Schiller feel that he might really be able to do it. But he still remembers calling Miss Pepper and saying, Miss Pepper, good afternoon, it's like this, I did some hyperthermia on Mr. Stark. Ah, yes, I made it myself, but it worked, but there are some side effects. Yes, has he already gone to the lab? What, didn't even think of your afternoon date? Then he's too rude. Yes, it has been like this for the past few days. This is the only way to adjust dopamine secretion and adrenaline, and then his hormone levels will drop and return to normal values. Yes, it will be better soon. Schiller is talking nonsense. His move is commonly known as chicken blood, and it is full of buffs. Stark will definitely take a buff called mission, and plunge into the laboratory. I won't be leaving for half a month. He suddenly found that he had a unique talent in stacking buffs. Schiller touched his chin, if only he could stack it himself. However, his basic panel is too weak, and no matter how much data he stacks, he still can't get up. It is better to think about how to improve the basics. Schiller has returned to the Marvel world since he depressed Batman that night, and after giving Stark blood, Daredevil in Hell's Kitchen went to avoid vengeance, and the little spider just gained the ability. Before making his official debut, Schiller was idle. After that night, Schiller found that he had another chance to chat randomly, and now he has figured it out. As long as he has a greater influence on a character in a certain world, he can get a chance to randomly match a chat object. Obviously, the conversation with Batman that night had a profound effect on him. Schiller intends to use this chat opportunity during this free time. Professor Charles seems to be busy with recruiting students recently. The little spider is too excited to get a new ability and can't reply to the news. There is no one to chat for a while. Schiller feels quite lonely. So, he used the chance of random chat, and a voice call interface suddenly appeared in his mind, which had never appeared in chatting with Charles or Little Spider. Both of them responded by typing, and all that appeared in Schiller's mind were chat boxes, but this time it was directly voiced. Schiller took a look at the avatar, the Supreme Mage Gu. The Supreme Mage Gu sent you an invitation for a voice call. Did you answer or not? What did you say? Schiller scratched his head, but finally took it. The mysterious voice of the universe, where did you come from? Schiller felt a series of voices, and it was inaccurate to say that the voices were more like thoughts and brain waves. Schiller didn't hear any voices, but he understood the meaning of the other side. Schiller also replied with his mind. Who are you? On the Himalayas, Gu, who was sitting cross-legged on a futon, was contemplating seriously when suddenly, she frowned, and a voice replied to her. Gu often seeks answers from the noisy cosmic voices through meditation. Various echoes in the universe represent different mysterious omens in her mind. She can divination, wash her mind and gain peace by listening to these cosmic voices. But these cosmic sounds have always been disordered noises, without any logical notes. Gu firmly believes that any conscious spirits roaming in the universe are the future cosmic demons. So she immediately raised her vigilance. She concentrated her energy with all her strength. Her mind was so powerful that she could even sweep through all the universes nearby in an instant, but she scanned around and found nothing unusual. The voice that answered her seemed to appear out of thin air, with no origin and no abnormal energy. S.H.I.E.L.D knows that Ji-Yu-Yi is very strong. If the comic setting is integrated, it will be several times stronger than the movie. Moreover, the current Supreme Mage is not a young Batman. She is already in her prime, but S.H.I.E.L.D still intends to be rich. Seek at risk. He said, answer me, quote. No matter where you come from, no matter who you are. Stay away from the earth. Ji-Yu-Yi's reply was strong. Quote. Guardian of the earth, answer me. I am the Supreme Mage of Earth. Who are you? Why do you send out a cosmic signal? I'm from Carcosa, Aldebaran Galaxy Lake Harry. The dark sun is already high in the sky. Ji-Yu-Yi felt a series of incomprehensible messages coming from the opposite side. She knew that it was very dangerous to communicate with an unknown creature in the universe, but she had to figure out whether the other party would harm the Earth. The other party's message was very obscure and difficult, but Ji-Yu-Yi heard several recurring messages: Carcosa, Hastur, Lake Harry. After a conversation between the donkey mouth and the horse's mouth, Ji-Yu-Yi almost figured it out. The other side seemed to be warning him. She heard the other side repeating a sentence: the day when the stars return, when the old days return. Ji-Yu-Yi thinks that the person on the opposite side may be called Asta, living in a place called Carcosa, where there is a hairy lake, which is shrouded in thick fog, and his enemy is called Old One. The demon gods of will return to Earth when the stars return. Under Ji-Yu-Yi's questioning, she learned that the existence on the opposite side seemed to be imprisoned, so she couldn't deal with his enemy in person. He spread signals near the Earth to warn the people of the Earth. But Ji-Yu-Yi knew that the life forms of the Earth and this group of cosmic demon gods were different, and they couldn't hear those cosmic signals at all. If he hadn't meditated every day, no one would be able to understand what the creatures on the opposite side were saying. Even Ji-Yu-Yi, she couldn't fully understand the brainwave signal sent by the other party. There seemed to be too much information in it. The old ruler, the head of the demon god, Azathoth, the other party seemed to be eager to give all the information. But unfortunately, the Ancient One does not fully understand him. She doesn't actually trust this unknown creature in the universe, but she can't feel the existence of any other party, and she doesn't feel that the Earth is receiving extra attention, but the warning attitude of the other party makes her feel the pressure. Where is this? A group of demon gods appeared again. And they seem to be able to silently come to the Earth to spread signals. Who can guarantee that they will not affect the human spirit? It has to be said that Ji-Yu-Yi has not been in vain for so many years, and her worries are very reasonable. If this story is not made up by S.H.I.E.L.D, then the Cthulhu mythology line is really crazy. But fortunately, this was just made up by S.H.I.E.L.D to fool Ji-Yu-Yi. Just when Ji-Yu-Yi wanted to continue the test, the communication was disconnected, and the opposite side seemed to be in some trouble. He neither made any demands nor wanted to lend his power to anyone, nor did he talk nonsense about ruling the universe, which made Ji-Yu-Yi believe him somewhat. Demon gods rarely know how to hide. They can't help their madness and chaos. If the opposite is a dangerous guy, the experienced Ji-Yu-Yi will definitely go over the network cable and cut him. But now it seems that the demon opposite seems to be very gentle and rational, but Ji-Yu-Yi did not let down his guard at all. This may just be an appearance. S.H.I.E.L.D grasped the essence of keeping half of what he said. Before he could ask Ji-Yu-Yi for more details, he hung up the phone and rubbed his hands, intending to replicate Ji-Yu-Yi's ability. He clicked, and the system prompt sounded: Magic ability low level has been loaded. S.H.I.E.L.D knew that Ji-Yu-Yi's ability must be mysterious, and must be related to magic. After loading the magic ability, S.H.I.E.L.D began to test, and then he found that this ability can be said to be mixed. The good thing is that he doesn't have to follow the magic setting of the Marvel world. S.H.I.E.L.D can cast magic without paying any price and without any side effects. But the bad news is that this is really just a low-level magical ability. S.H.I.E.L.D can do things like teleportation, fire magic, and a short-distance flash. The range of teleportation is about 10 meters, which is similar to the floating spell. S.H.I.E.L.D can move items within 10 meters at will, but only items that do not exceed S.H.I.E.L.D's weight, such as houses or cars, are not allowed. Mobile. The flame spell is also almost non-aggressive. S.H.I.E.L.D can ignite a cluster of flames in the palm of his hand. The power of this flame is probably to light a cigarette, or to burn a piece of paper or a book. Is thinking too much? The most useful thing is blink. S.H.I.E.L.D can appear or disappear at any location within a range of about 20 meters, which is enough for him to avoid many dangers. However, although he doesn't need to pay a price to cast magic, it will also consume physical and mental energy. After about 5 or 6 consecutive flashes, S.H.I.E.L.D will be too tired to stand up. What's more, his brain started to clutter and some couldn't concentrate, the result of overuse of magic. However, compared to the high price that Marvel's other mages have to pay to cast magic, S.H.I.E.L.D has been very lucky. These abilities he loaded are often marked with low-level words, which means that these abilities must be upgradable, but S.H.I.E.L.D has not yet found a way to upgrade them. He guessed that maybe it was to improve the intimacy with the chat characters, and he could gain more advanced abilities by helping them or saving them. The continuous flashing in the limit state can make S.H.I.E.L.D leave the place more than 100 meters in a very short time, and this ability ignores obstacles on the way and can pass through walls. He can sit in his own psych clinic and appear in a house 2 streets away in an instant. The biggest benefit to S.H.I.E.L.D is that S.H.I.E.L.D agents can finally no longer hold his tail. Of course, the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D have long since chased down Hell's Kitchen, but as S.H.I.E.L.D expected, there are many people here. Gangsters will be very vigilant against outsiders, and S.H.I.E.L.D will often encounter various. For example, when they rented the house opposite the S.H.I.E.L.D clinic, they were defrauded of a lot of money. Since S.H.I.E.L.D started to use Blink to go out, the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D have been completely confused. Obviously they didn't see S.H.I.E.L.D going out, but after a while, S.H.I.E.L.D came back from the street. Or they saw S.H.I.E.L.D go out and didn't see him come back, but after a while he showed up at the clinic again. This completely broke the S.H.I.E.L.D agents' speculation about S.H.I.E.L.D's work and rest time. But it reinforced Nick Fury's idea that S.H.I.E.L.D is a dangerous figure of uncertainty, especially as he and Stark are getting closer and closer, which is not good news. The idea that S.H.I.E.L.D wants to play Stark's card has been written on its face. Obviously, Nick Fury wants to use Stark's sense of justice to serve S.H.I.E.L.D. And it's not just the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D who have encountered strange things. S.H.I.E.L.D has also noticed strange things around the clinic these days. Until the cake he put in the refrigerator lost 4 pounds again, S.H.I.E.L.D confirmed that his clinic must be a burglar. There are countless thefts in the Hell's Kitchen, but S.H.I.E.L.D has never heard of a Hell's Kitchen thief who would stare at the cake and steal, not only the cake, but also S.H.I.E.L.D's ground coffee powder, soda cookies and jam. Is this thief a reincarnation of a starving ghost? It's not enough to steal 4 pounds of cake a day, but also to add half a caddy of soda crackers, 2 cans of ground coffee and 3 bottles of jam. He's not afraid of killing himself, S.H.I.E.L.D thought. Of course, even though it wasn't anything important to lose, S.H.I.E.L.D still had to catch the thief and figure out how he stole it. S.H.I.E.L.D made a trap, using the thief's favorite cake and a little bit of fear gas, and placed it in the warehouse he rarely visited in the house, waiting for the thief to take the bait. While waiting for the bait to take effect, S.H.I.E.L.D wrote in a notebook the story he would use to fool Ji next. Instilling the concept of the King of Yellow Clothes into Ji is not a purposeless act of S.H.I.E.L.D. In the worldview of the Marvel Universe, there are countless cosmic demons, such as the Trinity Wycian Emperor. Ji borrowed his power. The origin of Cthulhu in Marvel is relatively scattered. Some say it is the incarnation of nothingness, and some say it is the blood and tears of the universe. They are not a unified race, and they basically look strange. The real Cthulhu literature is more systematic. Everything starts from the devil Azados, but S.H.I.E.L.D and Ji mentioned another system, that is, Chambers once wrote in his short story a cursed script fictionalized in The King in Yellow Clothes. The setting in this script is more illusory and romantic than the Cthulhu mythology. In the far-off star cluster, on Lake Harry in the ancient city of Carcosa, an ancient outer god, the King in Yellow, is imprisoned. He witnessed the fall of 2 black suns, and he was later set as the representative of wind in the Old Ones, and became a mortal enemy with Cthulhu. And the most well-known is a mark that belongs to him in the setting of the King of Yellow Clothes, the Yellow Seal. But in fact, none of this is important. The important thing is that S.H.I.E.L.D needs to have a reasonable identity to talk to Ji. He can use the identity of a psychiatrist to talk to Stark, or he can play the role of Little Spider's life mentor, or it doesn't matter if Daredevil treats him as a criminal. But Ji was different. If Schiller didn't have a mysterious and powerful identity, the powerful Supreme Mage would not listen to him. Since Schiller had read the comics, he knew that in the worldview of the Marvel Universe, there was also the existence of the Old Ones, and now he reminded Ji Yuyi, and if Ji Yuyi went to verify, she would find out that Schiller played how everything that Star said was true. There was a group of blind and foolish Old Ones who were imprisoned in extra dimensions, but no one knew if they would ever return to Earth. As long as Ji Yuyi has a 3-point confidence in the identity of the King in Yellow, played by Schiller, Schiller can get a lot of information he wants from Ji Yuyi. In the process of waiting for the thief trap to take effect, Schiller intermittently completed the setting of the Hyades star cluster. And the thief didn't make Schiller wait too long. On a dark and windy night, there was rarely a gunshot in Hell's Kitchen. Schiller was lying on the bed, half asleep when he heard a loud noise from the warehouse downstairs. He immediately woke up and knew that the trap he laid had worked. He really didn't expect that he could actually catch this thief with a piece of cake. He tiptoed downstairs without turning on the lights, because if the other party had a gun and found him coming down, he would definitely aim here in advance. For his own safety, when Schiller walked to the other side of the corridor, he planned to use Flash to teleport directly, so that the opponent could be caught off guard. Just when he was about to flash, he suddenly found that the door of the warehouse was open. Could it be that this thief was not controlled by the fear gas? Can you even open the door and walk out? This is a little off. Schiller gave up the plan to Flash, because once teleportation passed, not only would the thief have to react for a while, but Schiller himself would have about 2 seconds to accept the unfamiliar environment, and he did this every time he teleported. He found that the thief didn't seem to notice himself. He tiptoed against the wall and walked along the corridor, only to find an extremely short figure, only about the height of a person's calf, and a round figure walked through the crack of the door. He came out and complained while walking, "Am I drunk? Why does this cake smell like a digester?" Schiller looked at the figure and hesitated, then he turned around, touched the switch of the electric light, and turned on the light with a pop. The round creature on the opposite side screamed, and instantly wanted to run when all fours landed on the ground. Schiller stretched out his right hand, a magic trick of taking objects from the air, and the creature was directly caught in his hand. Schiller's face was ugly, and he felt the fluffy touch in his hand. In his hand, it was a yellow one with 2 long ears, round and fat, and a lightning-shaped tail. Pikachu. "Shit, let me down. Don't touch me with your dirty hands. What's the matter with you? How could you catch me? Let me go." Now Schiller's face is ugly, and he never dreamed that in such a serious, even slightly dark story, how could a yellow-haired electric mouse appear? Suddenly, he felt that Pikachu's screaming voice was vaguely familiar. Isn't this the voice of Deadpool? Schiller recalled with some horror that there was indeed a movie in Hollywood about Pikachu, and that was Detective Pikachu. The Pikachu in this movie was indeed the same voice as Deadpool. Schiller took a deep breath, turned Pikachu around, grabbed its 2 short hands, and said, "You stole my cake, soda biscuits, coffee powder, and jam." Pikachu's eyes twitched for a while, and its cute and exploding face showed a humane expression of disgust, and said in the voice of Deadpool, "Hey, man, I really don't know about you. Why is the taste so bad? The soda crackers you bought turned out to be butterfree and horribly unpalatable, and that jam, how could you like strawberry jam? That's really not my taste, and next time you cut it after the cake, can you not put the cake knife on top of the cake? You know it's dirty." Schiller is holding Pikachu in one hand and covering his eyes with one hand. This is really a huge mental pollution to him. In the face of Pikachu's complaints, he is really powerless to refute, because his taste is indeed the same as that of a real American. Not quite the same. "Listen, you thief, first of all, you stole my food again and again, and second, you don't even feel any guilt, it seems that you are a repeat offender. Come on." Pikachu waved his hand, and it said, "Obviously you are not a normal person, no ordinary person can talk to him calmly after seeing a mouse speak." Schiller pursed his lips and stared at Pikachu, mainly because the appearance of Pikachu brought a huge impact on his worldview. You know, he was just chatting with Batman about the ideals of life in the dark Gotham, and in a blink of an eye, this yellow mouse with a taste of Deadpool appeared in front of him, which made Schiller not short-circuit his brain. Next, does he have to go for a walk in the surrounding grass? After collecting all Pokémon companions, go to challenge each gym. This style of painting is completely wrong, isn't it? More importantly, although this yellow electric mouse is only the height of a human calf, it has the mouth of a dead servant. The deadliest part of Deadpool's body. The good thing is that I didn't learn at all. Get rid of its essence and take its dross, it belongs to yes. This reminded Sheila of reading comics in the previous life, the comic pages that were often taken up by Deadpool's words frame at every turn. Now the Deadpool version of Pikachu, Deadpool, and Spider are all together. Schiller felt that if he lived in the comics, he would probably be blocked so much that he couldn't even see his face. And he remembered that in the Hollywood version of Detective Pikachu, the setting of Pikachu is actually the setting of the Japanese game of the same name. The detective, judging from Pikachu's reaction just now, he is indeed not low in IQ, and he is definitely not a simple pet. After a while, Schiller and Pikachu sat on the sofa facing each other. Pikachu held a cup of coffee in his short hand and said, "Actually, I have no memory, I only remember that after a flash, I fell into it. It took me a lot of effort to get out of the garbage truck. I was so hungry that I walked for a long time, but this street is closed, and there is no one I can get in, only you. The back door of your warehouse seems to be it's not closed. After I came in, I found the refrigerator along the corridor. Of course, it's my fault for stealing things, but I'm really hungry. If I make money, I will put I paid you for the cake." Schiller applauded him, and then said, "I have to say, as a rat, your ideological awareness is really high and terrifying. If the rats all over the world can be as polite as you, then humans don't need to. So many rodenticides have been invented. So you put rodenticide next to the cake today. That smells too bad. Seriously, that smell almost killed me. Actually, it's not a rodenticide. It's actually more terrifying than a rodenticide. Forget it, you're just a mouse anyway." Schiller put down the coffee cup, stared at Pikachu curiously, and said, "So, do you know that? What can I do?" Pikachu looked at him suspiciously. Seeing the extremely humanized expression on the cute yellow face, Schiller felt mixed feelings in his heart. He said, "That's it. What are you talking about? Okay, Pikachu, listen, you said you wanted to make money and pay for the food you stole. But I don't think anyone else here would accept a yellow rat who can only talk to work, so if you want to compensate for my losses, you can only stay with me to work, and if you want to get a chance to work, you have to show your boss what talents you have, right?" "Oh, I see, you mean discharge, right? This is my housekeeping skill. With me, you can pay at least half of your electricity bill for a month, but I was too hungry before, and I haven't recovered yet. So it is estimated that 100,000 volts will not be released, but it is still no problem to charge your mobile phone. Having said that, you reading www. Uakanshu." It landed on 4 short legs and ran to the table in a swish. It jumped on the table, took out Schiller's charging phone, and ran back to the sofa with the phone to show Schiller. Pikachu's lightning-shaped tail stretched out, and the whole body flashed with electric light, and Schiller's mobile phone screen lit up, showing that it was charging, but the speed was not fast. It seemed that Pikachu was trying to show off his abilities. It hugged the phone tightly, and swung its tail vigorously, and then stretched it out hard. Electric light buzzed all over its body, and the phone charged so fast that it charged 10 in almost a second. Percent electricity. Just a second before Schiller stopped it, the phone made a loud bang. Pikachu's yellow fur was blown black, and he exhaled a puff of black smoke. Then he helplessly looked down at the phone that had exploded in his arms, and said, "It seems that you can only allow me to work here, otherwise I will. I'm afraid I won't be able to pay for it for the rest of my life." Schiller covered his forehead and said, "Your performance is really wonderful, it surprised me. I really can't imagine that there is such a useful charging socket in this world." Pikachu heard his yin and yang, and just as he was about to speak, Schiller said, "Okay, but this is not what I want to see." "Then what do you want to see? What other talents do I have? I don't know how." "Of course you know, that's it." Schiller stared at Pikachu with bright eyes, and Pikachu suddenly showed a complicated look, like eating shit. Under Schiller's gaze, it reluctantly turned around, jumped onto the back of the sofa, and let out a loud Pika Pika. Schiller was satisfied. "You mean, after you stayed there for a few days, the biggest problem you found was, he might steal electricity." Nick Fury was standing in the S.H.I.E.L.D. office, holding a newspaper and asking Coulson, Coulson also knows that this report is really like something that he got up early in the morning to rush to work because he had no time to write with a hangover the day before. The conclusion above is only one bottle of whiskey away from nonsense. Nick Fury took the report and took a deep breath. His mouth was open, but he still paused for a moment, obviously speechless. He said, "Actually, I have always disagreed with the rating standard of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, Coulson. I think you are my strongest argument against this standard, aren't you?" "Ah," Coulson rubbed his hands awkwardly and said, "Actually, we didn't observe anything. We found that there may be tunnels in the underground of his clinic." "I should have called Nurse Jenny to give you a DUI test, Coulson. You said, target observed often popping up somewhere else 100 meters or so outside of the clinic, and you concluded that maybe there's a tunnel under the clinic," Nick Fury said. "Actually, I know that he may have the ability to teleport," Coulson said. He folded his arms and frowned and said, "But according to the cases we have come into contact with, teleportation always has the moment of landing, and we arrange around it." Hundreds of tiny cameras were used, but none of them captured anything unusual. Nick Fury said, "Then go and add a few hundred more. He is very important to us at present, and he is the most difficult opponent to deal with. Don't be careless." At this time, on the bed of the professor's apartment at Gotham University, S.H.I.E.L.D. just woke up and found that he was holding a fluffy thing in his arms. He looked down. "Pikachu. Oh, what's wrong with you? What time is it?" Pikachu couldn't open his sleepy eyes. S.H.I.E.L.D. rubbed his eyes. Why did the rat come with him? Pikachu looked around with sleepy eyes, was startled, woke up instantly, and said, "Where is this? How did you bring me here? You are actually a personal trafficker." S.H.I.E.L.D. said while folding the quilt, "Why don't you explain to me first why you are in my bed?" "How dare you ask me?" Pikachu yelled, and it said, "On the 3rd floor, you only turn on the heating in your room. If I hadn't picked the lock, I'd be frozen to death by now." Quote. "Oh, is it?" S.H.I.E.L.D. said without any guilt. "Freeze-drying mice is not a good idea. So why are you here? Where is this? As you can see, I will travel through time and space, so I'll be here as soon as I wake up," S.H.I.E.L.D. said. "This is a very dangerous place. If you run around, you will be stewed within 3 minutes." "Hey," Pikachu made a disdainful snort and said, "You can travel through time and space. Then I can still splash." Quote. S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't tell a lie, and Pikachu knew nothing. After all, he was a rat. In the eyes of these superheroes, his words were not even as credible as a repeater. If he went to Batman, Batman would definitely be the first. Stew it for a while. Batman doesn't kill people, but it's not that he doesn't kill mice. In the face of non-human creatures, very few heroes of the Earth have any trust in them. Although Pikachu speaks no different from humans, and has a strange Canadian accent, this obviously looks like some kind of yellow mouse of genetically modified organisms. It is obviously difficult to trust any normal person, so S.H.I.E.L.D. has nothing to worry about. While S.H.I.E.L.D. was making the bed, Pikachu jumped up and down to smell the room, wrinkling his little nose and muttering in disgust, "It seems that you are really capable. This is indeed not the original world." In the morning, S.H.I.E.L.D. went to class, and he carried Pikachu in his bag. It wasn't that he wanted to take Pikachu to class. The main reason was that if he didn't bring it, Pikachu would definitely slip out by himself and be stewed. Pikachu poked his head in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s bag and was pushed back several times by S.H.I.E.L.D. In the afternoon, S.H.I.E.L.D. put the bag on the table in the counseling room, pressed Pikachu's forehead and said, "Listen, even if I don't care about others. Seeing this strange yellow creature in my bag, I think you should also understand what I told you about superheroes. Each of them takes, nosy, as their life creed. No one will let go of studying you, the yellow rat, especially." While S.H.I.E.L.D. was talking, the door of the counseling room was suddenly opened, and Bruce said, "Professor, I." As soon as he entered the door, he saw that his professor was pressing his hand on the forehead of a strange yellow creature. Pikachu was startled and jumped into S.H.I.E.L.D.'s arms in an instant. S.H.I.E.L.D. pursed his lips, looked at Pikachu and then at Bruce. He hugged Pikachu and said, "If I say, this is a new breed of albino mole, do you believe?" "Don't believe me, are you going to make another one?" Bruce said with his arms crossed. Pikachu bared his teeth at him, and S.H.I.E.L.D. covered his mouth. He said, "What's the matter with you, Mr. Wayne?" Bruce walked over and said, "Actually, I'm sorry. It's like this, I want to invite you to Wayne Manor as a guest. Visiting Wayne Manor. What kind of invitation to surrender? Bruce is obviously a little awkward, because Schiller knows his true identity, so he can't grasp whether he should be Bruce or Batman, and the current Batman is not as cold as in the future, and he will even take the initiative to find Gordon to cooperate, so right now Bruce is in a very tangled state. Schiller could feel a little bit through telepathy. He knocked on the table and said actively, I can see that, Bruce, you are very confused now, sit down. Actually, you did a good job before. Bruce is not Batman, he is just an ignorant playboy. His favorite things are clubbing and drinking, surrounded by clouds of beautiful women. But Batman is just the opposite. Bruce sat down, pressed his fingers to the corners of his brows, and said, I don't know what's the point of doing this. I don't think I can deceive anyone. Bruce is not stupid either. He is the only rich man in Gotham City. He is the only one who has the financial resources to manufacture Batman's equipment. He doesn't think criminals are stupid, and he doesn't know that he is Bruce Wayne. Moreover, one or two can be inferred just from the figure. Bruce's game flowers will never be wrapped tightly at some point. It is not difficult to figure out some details of the figure. In particular, Schiller has seen Bruce go out in the middle of the night more than once, and the female companions around him have never been the same. Half of the famous Nightingale cheering troupe have been with Bruce. In fact, Schiller speculates that many villains with high IQs in the comics should not be completely kept in the dark. This reasoning is really not difficult, but they still make a pair of, who the is Batman? How can I guess? There must be a reason for the appearance of not coming out. Yeah, it's not really a secret, but as long as you want it to be a secret, it will be your weapon if necessary. If you show that a secret is important to you, others will think that the secret is important to you. You try to hide it, but if you reveal it at a critical moment, it will naturally prove your sincerity, even though it is not actually unimportant. Schiller was talking about what Bruce would do to Xavier in the future. In order to win the letter of Xavier, Batman took off his mask, announcing a secret that everyone actually knew. Batman was Bruce Wayne. But everyone still strengthened their trust in Batman, because Batman always showed great importance to this secret and was willing to reveal it for the sake of his companions. Of course, he could win the trust of others. Although this secret can be guessed by thinking about it, but it doesn't matter, what matters is attitude. Bruce touched his chin and said kindly, for example, if a criminal wants to threaten me with this, I can set a trap for him without any hassle. Okay, Mr. Wayne. Schiller glanced at his watch, and then said, it's time for a mental consultation. Regarding your invitation, I will consider it carefully after I get the invitation letter. Bruce didn't quite understand why Schiller should think carefully. In the United States, a verbal invitation means that this is a private visit, not formal, probably just a private dinner together. Reading www.uaconchu.com. But when Schiller mentioned the invitation letter, Bruce thought that maybe Schiller thought that this kind of invitation was not formal enough and did not seem to be taken seriously enough, so after he left the consultation room, he asked the butler A.Fu to prepare the invitation letter and the banquet. What he actually didn't know was that, for Schiller, being invited to his house by Batman was like saying to him, are you interested in taking a chance? He needs too much mental preparation. Although Schiller knows that the current Bruce is far from the Batman later, his two identities have not even been completely distinguished. If it is the Batman in the comics, Bruce will only come over with a bottle of wine and say that he will be at the party. Introduce him to a few beauties. Instead of being serious and awkward. But Schiller's stereotype of Batman is too deep. He even suspects that this is a deliberately set up by Batman in order to get his DNA, which is definitely something Batman can do. In addition, although Bruce didn't say it, it was clear that Pikachu, the yellow mouse, caught his attention. Schiller picked up Pikachu by its tail and said, did you see the person who just came? That's Gotham's handle. If you want to eat and drink spicy food in the future, it's best not to offend him. Pikachu struggled desperately, waving his short hands in midair, and said, put me down. That person just now was really scary. Schiller dragged Pikachu by its tail and brought it to him, and said, how did you know? Detective intuition. Pikachu shouted, and it said, you should really think about not staying here, it's making me chill, shouldn't we go back to where we were yesterday? I can even put up with you eating strawberry jam. Quote. Schiller looked Pikachu up and down and felt that it wasn't telling the truth. In the setting of Pokemon anime and games, Pikachu is far from being a powerful Pokemon. Its popularity is more due to its cute appearance. Whether in anime or games, Pikachu is absolutely adorable, and in fact his combat ability is quite average. Especially in the game, it can even be said to be a warehouse manager. Compared with those powerful and gorgeous mythical beasts, Pikachu is indeed cute, but it only has the advantage of being cute. But the Pikachu that Schiller encountered was far more than that simple. It had an IQ similar to, or even higher than, most humans. It possessed Pikachu's electrical skills, and seemed to have some other abilities. It is immune to Schiller's telepathy, and the fear gas just makes it fall over. In terms of volume, the dose of fear gas that Schiller used to set up the trap that day was enough to drive a small creature like Pikachu crazy, but Pikachu just sneezed a few more times. And he was able to pick the lock on his door and run to his bed while Schiller was sleeping. With Pikachu's height, he couldn't even reach the door handle when he jumped up. If he wanted to pick the lock, he had to at least move a chair over there. How did this round creature, with less than calf height and very short hands, move a chair in the middle of the night, jump on it to pick the lock, open the door, and then run to Schiller without letting him find out who? Also unknown. However, this Pikachu is obviously much more cunning than Schiller imagined. More importantly, Schiller couldn't be as serious as Batman when he listened to his Deadpool voice. Regardless of Pikachu's face, he always felt that there was a man in a black and red tights talking beside him, and this scene made him shudder. But soon, Schiller didn't have much time to worry about Pikachu. Gordon sent a text message to inform him that they had solid evidence of Jonathan's crime and were about to arrest him. Arresting Jonathan has nothing to do with Schiller. What he is more worried about is that no one will provide him with fear gas in the future, so he has to hurry up and take away Jonathan's inventory. Jonathan, this future Scarecrow, he is really unlucky enough. When he knew that Jonathan was about to be arrested, he basically got as much Schiller as he did. The young Scarecrow didn't have any sense of anti-investigation. He was really broken. Who would come to steal his fear gas? After Schiller has the ability to teleport, stealing fear gas has become easier. He only needs to flash directly into the underground of the chapel at a distance of more than 100 meters near the chapel in the Mosin block, and leave immediately after taking it. Not even a shadow will be left behind. Of course, Batman also participated in this arrest. With his superb infiltration ability, he returned to the laboratory again. He found that Jonathan had made a fear gas spray gun. He suggested Gordon to arrest Jonathan. Throwing the gas jet guns might drive all the police officers involved in the operation and the residents of the Mosin neighborhood insane. Although Gordon doesn't trust the tight-fitting weirdo, he also has his own difficulties. Everyone in the Gotham Police Department is a talented person. Except for him, they are basically 10,000 years of salted fish. When something goes wrong, they arrive at the scene last, and they can't expect anything from them. Don't think too much about the combat capability of this kind of team. A gas spray gun is enough to take down most of the police station. Don't expect his boss to give him any help. Gordon has already seen it through. The current director is colluding with some underworld forces. He doesn't want to have another trouble, but it's just dozens of civilians who died. Where can he delay his great cause of making money? Gordon was helpless and powerless. So the only person he can count on is Batman. Although the current Batman is immature, the Scarecrow is obviously not much stronger. The two of them are rookie chickens pecking each other, and in the end, it is obvious that Batman wins. He subdued Jonathan with an anesthesia needle while he was experimenting in the laboratory. And the camera on his bat suit clearly captured how Jonathan committed the crime. In the face of such a case with solid evidence, Gordon was kicked out, but Gordon's immediate boss took over the case, and quickly opened the case and started a trial, which is a good political achievement. A university professor turned out to be the planner of dozens of murders. In any other area, this should be a bizarre major case that occupies the front page of the newspaper for a few days, but in Gotham, although it is still a big case, it only occupies a column on the main page of the newspaper. Seeing that the names of Gordon and Batman did not appear in the newspapers, but all were full of praises for Gordon, Schiller knew that there was another unhappy heartbreaker in this dark city. Gordon, this good cop, still has a long way to go. To Schiller's expectations, Gordon quickly found him. In the counseling room at Gotham University, Schiller poured Gordon a cup of coffee. The young detective looked very tired at this time. He took a sip of hot coffee and his face improved a lot. He said, "I know that my visit is a bit presumptuous, Professor. But the case of Jonathan." Gordon seemed hesitant to speak, and Schiller said, "Let me guess, the trial of the case may have gone well, but when it came to the trial, something went wrong, right?" Gordon put his fists on the table, and he said with a gloomy face, "That murderer is a doctor of chemistry. You should know what this means in Gotham. Someone doesn't want to sentence him to death, but wants to say that he has excused him on the grounds of mental illness and let him work for them." Sitting across from him, Schiller said, "Indeed, if a genius like Doctor of Chemistry can produce even a new type of hallucinogenic drug, the person who hires him will make a fortune." Gordon shook his head and said, "It's far more than that. The drugs they want Jonathan to develop may be even more dangerous than this. If they invent drugs, it's just a little money from the addicts. But if they do invent a virus that can bring the whole of Gotham under their control, that's not how much money they can get." "Say more," Gordon said. "Someone leaked about the fear gas?" Schiller asked. "The effect of this poisonous gas is outstanding, which is why some people realize the power of Jonathan." Gordon looked at him, hesitated, and said, "I don't mean to offend, but I want to confirm, have you seen any suspicious people recently? I can tell you very clearly that I didn't tell anyone about it, and it didn't do me any good. As a college professor, it's disgraceful to have a fellow murderer." "What other connection did he have that would affect my career a lot?" Schiller said. "So," Gordon folded his hands and said, "I heard you call that straitjacket guy Bruce that night. He's Bruce Wayne, isn't he? On this topic, I can't tell you anything. You should ask him for proof yourself, not me." "I know what you're worried about," Schiller said. "As Gotham City's biggest business magnate, Bruce Wayne doesn't necessarily have to do with those dirty deals. And if he finds out, you're investigating this, you're going to die ugly." "You think so, don't you?" Gordon said. "Jonathan said in his confession that there was a man who stole most of his fear gas all the time. That bodysuit weirdo is the object of my suspicion. He is too suspicious." Schiller sighed a little. Those things that didn't appear in the comics seem to be very interesting now. Gordon and Batman, the old partner, didn't trust each other from the beginning, and Gordon was even suspicious of Batman, the grotesque vigilante. It's not surprising that any normal person would not be able to accept it from the beginning. Someone wearing a black tights and two pointy ears running around in Gotham in the middle of the night, this kind of behavior is really not like a nice guy. Schiller said, "Have you ever thought that he actually doubts you so much?" Gordon sighed and said, "Actually, he has more reason to doubt me. If he is really Bruce Wayne, I know that the Wayne children have never given up on the case back then. You reading www.uaconshu.com. The deaths of the Waynes and Misses are very bizarre. I have turned over the case file and there are so many things that are not right. If little Wayne is Batman, of course he will not trust any police, including me. The police in Gotham City," Gordon said with some sighs. "I know the police in this city are like decorations, and you can't count on them for anything." He looked a little dejected, sighed, and took a drink. Coffee, then silence. Schiller said, "As a rock in the quagmire, you are hard enough. You can't expect anyone to fish you out. It's better to roll yourself bigger and bigger. When you occupy the whole quagmire, there is also a stone here. The asphalt road makes no difference." "Do you think so? Do you think I should continue on this path?" Gordon also seemed a little confused. No wonder he was so depressed. He took huge risks and spent countless energy to solve the case, even if the credit was robbed. Gordon was originally just for justice, but now someone has killed dozens of civilians for profit. The murderer must be spared, which is really a big blow to Gordon. Schiller said with a smile, "Detective Gordon, it seems that you need a psychiatric consultation, but it just so happens that I happen to be a psychiatrist too, and I don't charge a fee." Gordon smiled reluctantly, and said, "I have seen your resume in the archives, Professor Schiller. It is my year-end award for a well-known psychologist like you to do psychotherapy for me." "Anyway, thank you," Schiller said. "No thanks, it's my honor to help a good cop in Gotham." Gordon's smile became more reluctant. He said like a sigh, "Good cop. Maybe. Schiller's serious psychological counseling for Gordon ended the moment Bruce opened the door. The three of them stared at each other, and Schiller asked, "Well, Mr. Wayne, as I said, you have no time for psychological consultation this week, right? Why don't you call ahead and ask if there is anyone in the counseling room for an appointment?" "What?" Bruce was also a little embarrassed. He really didn't expect Gordon to be here. He just came to send an invitation to Schiller. Bruce knew that his identity with Gordon might be exposed, but he also knew that Gordon not coming to him, not coming to Wayne Manor to find Bruce, means that he doesn't actually trust Batman. This makes Bruce a little frustrated, because he knows Gordon is indeed a good cop, and now a clear stream of the Gotham Police Department doesn't trust him, and even has some inexplicable hostility to him. Bruce knows that Batman must do more. You have to do something really useful in order to get a change. Schiller said, "It seems that God also wants us to form an alliance. Now that everyone is here, let's talk frankly. We all know what happened that night, and I know the three of us don't fully trust each other, but that's okay. We can still be temporarily united for a common goal, like getting my colleague, the one who creates fear gas, Dr. Jonathan, went to jail. Gordon knows that he has nothing to hide. If he can't solve this matter, his boss and the chief of the police department know that he is secretly investigating that someone is going to hire Jonathan, then he must die without a burial, no matter what. Whether it's Schiller or Bruce, Gordon can only hope that they are neutral at any rate, and even if they can't help him, at least they can give him some advice." Gordon frowned and said, "It must be worse than you think, Victor." "Oh, and now the chief of police, he was charged with trafficking high concentrations of sedatives, but he wasn't convicted. Instead, he went straight up. Some people speculated that Thrall was behind him, but no one had any evidence. My immediate boss, Rantelos, I have seen him enter and leave the club where the Red Crows are, but these old police officers are too cunning. No one can catch them." Schiller sighed. He knew that Gordon had also saved a bit of face for the Gotham Police Department. The Gotham City Police Department was almost all gangsters from top to bottom. Even the kindest police officers were nothing more than gangsters. Take gang money and do less work. Schiller asked, "Do you know Harvey?" "Harvey Bullock." Gordon frowned and thought for a while, then said, "You're talking about the fat guy who smoked and drank in the logistics department. What happened to him? Do you know him?" Harvey Bullock is depicted in some Batman comics as a fat Larry sloppy smoking and drinking. Gordon is right, but in most comics he is a bad cop. The good cops who pretend to be themselves seem to be in tune with those gangsters, but in fact they help Gordon secretly, and even in a certain comic, they team up with Gordon to defeat the Joker without Batman intervening. Schiller said, "You know, I have worked with the police in several cities. I heard that he taught at the police academy in Star City, and an old cop in the metropolis once mentioned him to me, and he said, Way really wants to be a good policeman, but he has suffered revenge, so he had to disguise himself with a decadent appearance, and even took the initiative to hook up with gangsters to find an umbrella for himself." "You think he can be trusted?" Gordon asked. Bruce chimed in, "You're not alone in the Gotham Police Department, and if you don't have any alliances in that one, it's almost impossible for you to take down your boss and the police chief, let alone the gang behind them." Quote, "I think you can try to contact Harvey, but don't tell him everything. I believe he must be paying attention to this case. If he is really trustworthy, he may secretly provide you with some help. The two of you can be one. In the light and in the dark, at least it can make a lot of stumbling blocks for your boss." Gordon said, "I'll go ask him." Bruce said, "As for your police chief, I will investigate him, of course, in another capacity, you know." Bruce didn't plan to hide from Gordon at first, because he knew that it was almost impossible to get help from a police officer in the police station without revealing his identity. "And the gang," Schiller said, "whether it's the Thrall you mentioned, or the Red Crow gang, I can go and see." The two stared at Schiller at the same time, and Gordon said hesitantly, "Professor, I know you have traveled in various cities, but I want to remind you that the gangsters in Gotham are different from all cities. They are extremely vicious beasts. Disregarding any legal principles and morality, they are a group of very vicious wolves." "Yes, that's why I'm going now. You know, if it's 2 months later, Gotham University will have a final test, then I won't have so much time." Schiller glanced at Bruce, and then said, "After all, many students here would rather go to a nightclub while the sun is still bright than spend more time studying. Bruce rubbed his nose in embarrassment. Gordon looked down at him and said, although I'm not a few years older than you, I still want to remind you that if you really want to be that leotard weirdo all the time, you'd better keep your private life a little bit tighter. Half the beauties in Gotham City have been in your bed. Do you think there will be a few black widows among them? Bruce said perfunctorily. Okay, I will pay attention, thank you for your reminder. Bruce's beautiful name is well known throughout Gotham City. I have to admit that even the 18-year-old Bruce is shockingly handsome. Although he doesn't have the temperament that has gone through the vicissitudes of life, just based on his handsome appearance, you can capture the hearts of countless opposite genders. Gossip about him is published almost every day in Gotham's entertainment newspapers, but Bruce's girlfriend in the photo has never been the same. Schiller wasn't very worried that he would be assassinated by a gangster mistress. What he was more worried about was Bruce's kidney. He felt that even if Batman continued to play like this, he would have to drink kidney treasure sooner or later. Unfortunately, as soon as Bruce returned to Wayne Manor, his old butler, Alfred, said to him, I would take the liberty to cancel your appointment tonight, because the data of your last medical examination were really not optimistic. Bruce was stunned for a moment, remembering the rather odd eyes of Gordon and Schiller during the day. He coughed awkwardly and said, help me cancel all the appointments for this month's night. Ah Fu was stunned for a moment, then his eyes gradually became strange. He said, Master, you invited Miss Christine to dinner 2 months ago. Are you sure that her invitation will also be cancelled? Bruce waved his hand and said, of course, I don't have much time to date them now. Ah Fu's eyes became even more strange. He hesitated and said, if there is any change in your body, I hope you will inform your loyal butler as soon as possible. Bruce covered his forehead and said, I'm going to go out to investigate things these few nights. Well, don't cancel Miss Christine's date. She's really charming. After Fu left, Bruce found that his phone was ringing, and it turned out to be Schiller's call. He picked it up, and Schiller said, you have a date with Christine, the head of the Nightingale football team's cheerleading troupe. Bruce was taken aback. Does Schiller really have the ability to read minds? But soon he found himself thinking too much. Schiller said, she had bragged to her sister that she had caught Little Wayne, but she disappeared 2 days after saying that, and her sister reported to the school. Anna from the personnel department asked me to contact you. I haven't dated her yet, Bruce said. Our date is 2 weeks away. You know, my schedule is quite full. Then her disappearance has nothing to do with you. It's strange. Schiller said. The personnel department told me that Christine knew that she was beautiful, so she was very cautious and never left school if she had nothing to do. She was almost graduating, but now she is missing. Bruce was a little wary. He said, could it be related to Jonathan's case? Is Jonathan familiar with her? Of course not. How can such a girl know Jonathan very well? She is a beautiful courtesan, and Jonathan is bored in the office all day. Schiller said, okay, Bruce, now that you have something new to do, find your future date, preferably before your date expires. But the Nightingales are Gotham University's business card. The disappearance of the cheerleaders' captain is a big blow to them. The National League playoffs are still 2 weeks away. If you can't find anyone, I'll put you off. Quote, hey, Professor, can't you, hello. Bruce put down the phone helplessly, and then called the school himself, only to find out that Christine was very popular in the cheerleading group, and many girls went to the school to ask for someone. Without the leader, their dance could not be arranged, making the players of the football team dissatisfied. Just in time for Jonathan's arrest, the whole school was trying to find a way to quell public opinion, and when no one was free, Schiller, a new professor, was arrested as a strong man. Then Batman was captured by Schiller. Bruce began to think, a beautiful girl disappeared in Gotham, and the result of this matter almost didn't need to be thought about, but Schiller said, this Miss Christine is a very cautious person, usually does not leave school, she is missing from Gotham University's school. It's hard not to suspect that it has something to do with the Jonathan case. 1 sheep is also driven, and 2 sheep are also released. Bruce didn't care about Schiller's intimidating threat. When did Bruce care about failing the class? Except for the psychology class, which he would take in Schiller's favor, other classes were either clubbing or nonsense. Thinking of this, Bruce remembered what Schiller had just said. Christine had mentioned to others that she was going to date him. Could this have anything to do with her disappearance? New York Hell's Kitchen. On the bed of Schiller's psychological clinic, Daredevil Matt let out a scream. Schiller took away the alcohol cotton ball in the tweezers and said, although no one will come from this street, you continue to be like this. Tighten the muscles, I'm sure I can't get the bullet out. He threw the cotton ball into the trash can, wiped the tweezers with an alcohol pad, and opened the wound on Daredevil's shoulder a little, and said, I have to cut the wound a little with a knife. Matt said, you have to give me some anesthesia, or I will definitely go into shock. A superhero who is afraid of pain, I really don't know whether to laugh at you or admire you. Schiller said. There aren't many people who can hurt me, but Jinbian found a great person this time, Matt said. Schiller looked at Matt's pale face. His lips were almost bloodless. Everyone's tolerance for pain was different. Daredevil Matt was obviously the more sensitive type. As Schiller said, such a person is a superhero, and I don't know whether it is worthy of ridicule or admiration. Schiller thought that superheroes can also be injured and bleed, and no amount of powerful drugs can completely avoid the pain. Perhaps Batman abandoned his superficial thoughts of revenge in the unbearable pain again and again, and found a better way for himself. Great goal. Only the great ideal of justice can support these superheroes to lick their wounds alone night after night. Schiller put down the tweezers and said, you're lucky, Matt, I have some good medicine here. He took out a small white bottle and handed it to Matt. Matt touched the package and smelled the smell, and said, how come you have this painkiller? You addict. Schiller said. Don't know the goods. This is different from the junk on the market. The concentration is the highest you can find. If you don't eat it, pay me back. This stuff is very expensive. What Schiller took out was the painkiller he had taken when he went to Jonathan's to steal the fear gas. Jonathan needed painkillers when he experimented with the experimental objects. These were all extracted by himself, and were much better than the ones he could buy. Matt still took a slice and said, God help me get better soon, then turn around and punch you. Don't take revenge for grace. It's normal to carry a little pill with you in Hell's Kitchen. It's not a crime. Matt felt the pain gradually receding. He couldn't admit that Schiller was right. In Hell's Kitchen, taking drugs was the most harmless hobby. And Schiller thought, if in Gotham, a person only has a habit of taking drugs, then he is as kind as an angel. Seeing Matt's complexion gradually recovering, Schiller asked him, why did you capsize in the gutter? Matt pursed his lips and said, it's not easy for Jin Bing to find someone. I took precautions in advance, but those guys who call themselves ninjas can lower their heartbeats. I can't hear them. Oh. Schiller used tweezers to hold the bullet he just took out. He turned the bullet from side to side and said, the ninja you mentioned are still fed up and have nothing to do. They even carved the pattern of cherry blossoms on the bullet. Matt looked exhausted, and Schiller shouted, Pikachu. Bring the bandages I put in the closet. Matt heard a little creature jumping onto the table, and it said with disgust, I told you not to treat him in the bedroom. Do you think the smell of blood smells good? Hey, bad luck, your bandage. Schiller caught the bandage thrown by Pikachu and wrapped it on Matt. Matt said, you better hurry up, I have to get out of here later. And then died on the street outside the door. Schiller asked. They have their eyes on me. Those ninjas have unique tracking skills. If they come here, we can't run away. Matt said. After all, he was still a good person, and he didn't want to implicate Schiller. Although Schiller wasn't a good person in his opinion, he saved him after all. Matt said that he was powerful, but he actually didn't want to retaliate. Schiller said while cleaning up the blood-stained tools, they don't need any special tracking skills. You run all the way from the next street with a strong smell of blood. If they haven't found out. Matt suddenly heard a violent wind, and he shouted, it's a dart. Dodge. He was anxious in his heart, because he could tell from Schiller's footsteps that he was just an untrained ordinary person, and faced with the group of ninja killers, there was almost no possibility of surviving. But soon, he heard a bang, the hidden weapon seemed to hit something, and Schiller was holding an umbrella. He thought, the umbrella is really a defensive weapon, especially for small things like darts, can greatly reduce their impact. There is only one person on the opposite side, because Schiller's telepathy is effective in a range, except for Matt, he can only feel the mood of one person. Miss, if you hesitate for 3 minutes before starting, why don't we sit down and have a cup of coffee together, Schiller said. Before waiting for the other side to answer, Schiller continued to speak to the air. You're right, your old friend is really merciful. I've never seen one that can just hit a bullet into the least fatal gap between the shoulder blades. Well, since you're here, why don't you come out and meet? There was a cold snort in the air on the opposite side, and then the killer on the opposite side left. Matt looked bewildered and said, What? What old friend? Schiller shook his head and said, Didn't you find it? Since the killer you met has the ability to shoot you without you finding it, why didn't she shoot in the heart or in the head? Isn't this bullet aimed at the heart? It's 108,000 miles away. Matt's mind was a little short-circuited. Obviously, he hadn't reacted yet. The killer on the opposite side was actually his former classmate and ex-girlfriend Erica. Schiller, who knows the plot, is very clear that Erica is afraid that she will be entangled to death at this time, and she has no love for Matt, but she is hesitant to complete the task. Her identity, she ran away in a hurry, obviously not wanting to let Matt know who she was. This is true, don't guess a woman's mind. Soon, Daredevil Matt passed out in pain and apprehension, and Schiller put the shutters on the clinic door down and locked them, and closed and locked all the windows. He stood by the bed, watching New York City night sky. A shining meteor streaked across the sky, and countless couples made wishes to the sky, but it was actually Stark's Mecca. The people in Hell's Kitchen didn't have the time to make a wish on the meteor, but Schiller took out his mobile phone and called Stark. As soon as the call was connected, Schiller said, Miss Pepper knows that you would rather drive around in the Mecca in the air, don't you want to go back to accompany her? Then, under the watchful eyes of countless couples, the meteor fell headlong. After the meeting, on the roof of Schiller's psychological clinic, Stark was wearing a smoking Mark V and complained to Schiller, I should have put you on the blacklist of my address book. Schiller lit him a cigarette and said, a middle-aged man who doesn't sleep at night and goes out for a race car, and drives such a resentful curve, isn't it strange that he is arguing with his wife? Stark also walked to the eaves and sat down. He took the cigarette from Schiller. He said, She put a lot of pressure on me. To be honest, I didn't think about it. Don't think about anything. Do you want to marry Pepper? Stark coughed twice and said, marriage. Did you skip some important steps? Oh, yes, in the eyes of a stallion like you, there is indeed an important step. Don't say that, Pepper is different from those women. I just don't know that you are different from other men in her eyes, Schiller said. Before Stark could answer, Schiller continued, but I think it should be about the same. You haven't been with her as long as the chief security officer. Then I'll fire the security guard when I go back, Stark said angrily. Obviously, he was avoiding some problems. After a while, Stark touched his cheek, and he said with some confusion. You really know how to read minds. I said, do I believe you? If you don't believe it, don't keep asking. Schiller said. I want to find a way to make me believe that there is mind reading in this world, and then you can tell me what Pepper thinks. Stark said. Iron Man is not a traditional, just an invincible, type of hero. He has a sensitive and sentimental heart, and has a perceptual brain that does not match his technological genius, so he always entangles his emotions into a mess. In the face of Pepper, Stark was always unable to move forward bravely. www.mtlnovel.com, he didn't realize that this attitude actually said a lot. Schiller changed the subject. He said, how's that kid in the red and blue tights in New York City lately? I heard you complain about him. Oh, yes, a kid in an ugly can't ugliest tights jumping up and down the city, swinging around like a flea, said Stark, who said, Jarvis said the kid should be underage, I'm going to catch him and throw him home. Schiller said, I have some clues here, do you want to hear it? I saw him a few times on the edge of Hell's Kitchen. He didn't dare to come in. I saw that he had a high school logo on his blue pants that day. It was from Queens. You call this a clue? Stark sneered, and Schiller continued. It can be seen that he has no money to buy a good outfit for himself, and his family situation should not be very good, so it must not be those expensive ones. The terrible private schools are mostly students from Midtown High School or Forest High School. Forest High School is a boarding school. If any students come out to hang around like this, their legs will probably be broken. And Midtown High School is much more rambunctious. Judging from his size, it is estimated that he is a freshman or sophomore. A little kid, Stark concluded. He said, I guess he made a toy by himself. If he can use it to be majestic, he can't wait to come out and wander around. So, are you going to let him experience the dangers of adults? Schiller asked. Of course, more importantly, New York City is not his playground, Stark said. Although he has just recovered, he is an adult who has experienced major events after all. He knows that something will happen sooner or later when little Spider wanders around like this. In fact, some media have already noticed him. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.